Every morning you wake up and fall into motion. Thoughts rush in, patterns kick in, and before you realize it, you're moving through yet another day. Another loop, another repeat, another stretch of time you've labeled as your life. But pause with me here. Let's slow the momentum and examine this machine you've become so fluent in running. Because what's propelling you might not be your true self. It might be something else, something that's been acting as you. For years, there's a reason your growth feels like a grind. There's a reason your confidence collapses at the edge of breakthroughs. There's a reason your life looks capable on the outside, but hollow when no one's watching. And it's not because you're broken. It's because you're repeating a version of yourself that was never designed to win. Not truly. This version of you, the one you keep waking up as, isn't lazy. It's loyal. Loyal to a script. Loyal to a memory. Loyal to a version of you that once needed protection but now only knows how to prevent progress. We call it the echo self. The echo self is a copy of you created by necessity, formed in pain, strengthened by habit, reinforced by environment, and mistaken for truth. But here's what makes this dangerous. Feels real, sounds like you, it even suffers for you. And because of that, you've never questioned its seat at the table. Until now. What you're about to experience isn't motivation. It's not inspiration. This is a confrontation with the identity that's been keeping your alignment locked inside a box called survival. For the next few hours, we are going to dissect that box. And more importantly, we're going to give you the tools to burn it. You'll understand why your dreams feel distant even when you work hard. You'll uncover how your internal voice was hijacked by a version of you built in fear. You'll realize how self-sabotage is not failure, it's memory. Memory of who you thought you needed to be to stay accepted, safe, or invisible. But that memory is outdated. And now, it's standing in the way. This series is not about finding yourself. It's about exposing the version of you that's not supposed to make it. The version of you that was never designed for thriving, only surviving. And then replacing that echo with the identity that aligns with your next evolution. That means pulling apart every automatic loop you're stuck in. It means recognizing the difference between the voice of your power and the whisper of your protection. And it means accepting that the life meant for you can only happen if you stop pretending the current you is final. Because it's not. It never was. By the end of this series, you will not only know who you are, you'll know who you're not. You'll know how to identify the moments you shift into echo mode. You'll have language to challenge the lies that sound like logic. And you'll be equipped with a framework to stay in alignment, even when life tries to drag you back into character. But before any of that, there's one truth we need to face together. The version of you running your life right now might not be you at all. Now that we've cracked open the unsettling idea that the version of you navigating your days might not be your real self, we need to trace this identity back to its origin. Because an echo doesn't just appear. It's created. Echoes only happen when sound meets resistance, walls, canyons, chambers. The same is true for your echo self. Your echo identity was born the moment you met emotional resistance, rejection, shame, abandonment, silence. You responded with an instinct older than thought. Adaptation. You changed subtly then fully. You wore a smile when you wanted to cry. You became capable when you needed care. You turned invisible to stay accepted. And over time, you forgot you were pretending. The echo identity isn't a villain. It's a survivor. It was created to navigate threats. But survival has a cost. And the price is authenticity. Let's get clear. This ghost version of you didn't start out feeling fake. Felt smart. Felt safe. It may have even helped you earn praise, avoid conflict, get through trauma. But survival doesn't lead to success. And safety isn't the same as alignment. Alignment requires exposure, truth, risk, vulnerability. And none of those are acceptable in the echo identity's world. So instead of facing truth, the echo became excellent at impersonation. It learned your voice, copied your desires. It mirrored your logic. It even learned how to imitate growth. But underneath that smooth voice was a singular obsession. Control. Because control is what kept it alive. Every time you tried something new and pulled back at the last second, that was the echo. Every time you shrank even when you knew you were ready, that was the echo. Every time you got close to a breakthrough and sabotaged it, that wasn't fear. That was the ghost version of you preserving the only reality it knew how to manage. Control, containment, predictability. Your echo identity needs your life to stay small. It doesn't hate you, it simply can't survive in environments where your power is fully present. Here's the tricky part. The echo doesn't argue with your dreams. It agrees. It even cheers them on until action is required. Then suddenly it will drown you in overthinking. It will twist ambition into anxiety. It will call procrastination timing. It will turn your wisdom into warning signs. It doesn't use fear. It uses familiarity. Because familiarity feels right, even when it's ruining you. The echo identity is brilliant at using your past to define your future. Collects evidence. It replays scenes. It shows you why this will never work. And you believe it, because it sounds so much like your own voice. But now that you see it, you can question it. You can separate the thought from the thinker. You can observe the urge to shrink and say, "This is not who I am. It's who I needed to be." You're not fighting fear. You're facing a fragment. An old program still running in the background, pretending to be the operating system. But there's more. The echo version of you doesn't just hijack your thoughts. It recruits your behavior, curates your circle. It even influences your goals, not to elevate you but to sustain itself. So ask yourself this: are the things you're working toward truly yours? Or are they echoes, goals based on avoiding pain, not expressing power? That's where many high-functioning, deeply frustrated people get stuck. They don't realize they've been chasing someone else's definition of growth. They've created identities that are high-performing, well-liked, and completely misaligned. Why? Because the echo doesn't want you to fail. It just wants you to stay familiar. Familiar misery, familiar rejection, familiar praise, familiar ceilings. So now, with all this exposed, the question becomes real. How much of what you call you was actually constructed out of necessity? And how much are you willing to release to become who you really are? Next, we will explore the eerily accurate way the echo self mimics your real voice. How it blends in with your emotions, disguises itself as logic, and keeps you convinced it's actually you. Stay with this. You're beginning to see what few people ever do. The identity you've kept repeating isn't a reflection. It's a replica, and it's time to stop handing it your life. Now that you've started recognizing how the echo self was formed, through pain, adaptation, and a long-standing need for control, it's time to confront a more deceptive layer of this entire construct. It sounds just like you. That's why it's so difficult to notice. It doesn't come disguised as someone else. It comes sounding like your own logic, your own reasoning, your own values. And that's how it survived this long, unquestioned. Let's be clear. The echo self doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into your life saying, "Hey, I'm here to keep you small." No, it wears your tone, copies your rhythm. It uses phrases you've always used and beliefs that used to protect you. So when you hear it in your head, it doesn't feel like deception. It feels like common sense. But listen closely. Underneath its convincing words, there's a signature tone, a subtle frequency that always carries the same message. Stay smaller than your potential. Here's how it usually works. You start to feel expansion. A dream opens. An opportunity knocks. A desire stirs. And for a few moments, it's pure. You feel yourself connecting to something real, something exciting. Then the voice shows up. It says, "Don't overreach. You're not quite ready. People like you don't get to do things like that. Be humble. Be careful. Don't ruin what you have." And because that voice doesn't feel foreign, you trust it. That's the trick. The echo self uses familiarity as camouflage. And over time, you begin to mistake the sound of safety for the sound of wisdom. Let that settle. The echo self isn't toxic in the way we typically define it. It's subtle. It's convincing. It doesn't yell at you. It whispers just loud enough to interrupt momentum. And every time you listen, you train your brain to associate growth with danger. This is why emotional breakthroughs feel so difficult. You're not just breaking patterns. You're breaking loyalty. Loyalty to the internal voice that once kept you safe, but now keeps you limited. You're not questioning your thoughts. You're questioning the source. That takes a deeper level of awareness. One that asks not, is this true? But rather, who is saying this? And here's what makes it even harder. The echo self doesn't only imitate your logic. It also hijacks your emotions. Think about the times you tried to level up and suddenly felt unexplainable heaviness, or when something beautiful started happening, but you became restless or irritated, or when you started achieving progress, and then spiraled into guilt, doubt, or self-judgment. That wasn't random. That wasn't emotional instability. That was the echo self realizing you were leaving the environment it needs to survive. So it floods you with old emotional patterns to pull you back. It uses your nervous system like a rope, tying you back to safety, to memory, to identity. At this point, you might be asking, how do I tell the difference between my real self and the echo self? How can I trust anything if they sound the same? The answer is pattern recognition. Not content, not tone, not words, pattern. The real you leads to expansion, peace even in uncertainty, clarity even when things are complex. The echo self leads to paralysis, hesitation, overanalysis, circular thinking, self-justifying withdrawal. Every time you listen to it, you loop, you rationalize, you end up almost ready, you end up figuring things out, you end up working on it. You don't move, you spin, and that spin feels productive, because the echo self loves intellectual activity without directional energy, keeps you in your head so you don't act from your core. Another clue. The echo self always needs external validation. It depends on how you'll be perceived, how others might react, what the world will think, how to stay accepted, how to avoid criticism. Your true self doesn't operate from that place. It's not reckless, but it's not ruled by optics either. It's grounded in direction, not reaction. The echo self is addicted to mirrors. It constantly needs to reflect what will be most acceptable in a given moment. It's a chameleon, not because it's adaptive, but because it's afraid to be seen for what it actually is. False. Let's look at the language it uses. The echo self uses phrases like, "Who do you think you are? You're not being realistic. People will think you're too much. You've changed. You should be grateful. This is selfish." The goal of that language is to destabilize your sense of worth, to shrink your capacity for risk, to make you question your expansion before you even begin. It makes you feel like you're betraying something, when you're really just stepping into what's always been yours. And you may have noticed this pattern by now. The echo self never attacks you when you're stuck. It only activates when you're trying to rise. When you're just surviving, it's quiet, supportive even. It agrees with your excuses, comforts your stagnation, it validates your frustration. But the moment you start moving with real intention, the voice changes, the tone shifts, and you're flooded with fear, guilt, or shame. Why? Because your alignment is a threat to its existence. The more you grow into your true self, the louder the echo fights back. At first, because it knows something you're only now starting to realize. You are not powerless. You are not uncertain. You are not indecisive. You've just been programmed to believe that anything unfamiliar equals unsafe. And the echo self is the guardian of that illusion. So let's put this plainly. Every time you hear a voice that tells you to shrink, every time you feel internal resistance that pushes you away from expansion, every time you doubt yourself when there's no evidence to support the doubt, that is not your intuition. That is not your wisdom. That is not your truth. That is your echo. And it's time to stop listening. The echo sounds like you because it was built from your memories. But those memories are not your destiny. The pain you felt, the roles you played, the masks you wore, all of that created a voice that has no right to decide your future. Now that you're starting to see the difference, you can begin to respond differently. You can interrupt the pattern. You can recognize the mimic and refuse to obey it. Because here's the truth that breaks its spell. You don't need that voice anymore. You are no longer in the same danger that required it. You've outgrown the system it was designed to operate within. And when you stop feeding the echo, you make space for something else. Something real. Something whole. Something aligned. Next, we will examine one of the biggest myths that has kept the echo alive in your life. The seductive lie of just being yourself. The advice that sounds empowering but often traps you in the identity that's been holding you back all along. It's time to question even the truths that sound like freedom. Because not all freedom is real, especially when it was designed by the voice of your echo. You've probably heard it your entire life. Just be yourself. A mantra passed around like a gift. An anthem of empowerment. A promise that if you stay true to who you are, everything will fall into place. But there's a hidden flaw in that phrase. A flaw that almost no one talks about, because the very person you're being might not be you at all. So when people say, just be yourself, they're often unknowingly encouraging you to stay in the echo. To stay in the very identity that was shaped by survival, not by purpose. Let's get honest about this. Most of us didn't develop our identity in a vacuum of truth. We didn't wake up one day and say, this is who I choose to be. We became who we had to be. For approval. For belonging. For peace. For safety. For love. So what we call ourselves is often a carefully built response to external expectations, not a declaration of inner alignment. This is the lie of the echo identity, that being yourself is the same as being free. But here's the thing, if you never chose the self you're being, then how can repeating it be called freedom? Let's explore this deeper. The echo self has mastered the art of blending in with the language of empowerment. It uses phrases like, this is just how I am. That's not my personality. I'm not that kind of person. And while those might feel like boundaries, more often they're prisons. Soft, padded, believable prisons. Because if your identity is based on who you had to become, not who you were designed to be, then being yourself is simply maintaining the original adaptation. You're just keeping the mask on, except now you've tattooed it, called it you. Defended it as truth. And the more you defend it, the more impossible it becomes to grow. Growth requires reinvention. It demands revision. It invites you to leave behind identities that no longer match your calling. But just being yourself teaches you to stay loyal to your current personality, even if it's outdated, even if it's inherited, even if it was formed in a season you've already outlived. That's why so many people feel stuck. They're trying to evolve while protecting the echo. They're reaching for a new life while gripping tightly to an old self. It doesn't work. You can't carry your future in one hand and your comfort in the other. One will always cancel the other out. This brings us to the core issue. Most people are not chasing alignment. They're chasing consistency. But consistency is only noble when the identity you're repeating is aligned with your true path. If it's not, then consistency becomes a chain, a loop, a slow-motion sabotage. You're trying to remain authentic to a self that was never authentic to begin with. And it's costing you your expansion. Let that sink in. You are not required to stay consistent with the identity you outgrew. You are not betraying yourself by evolving. You are betraying yourself by refusing to evolve just to keep others or your ego comfortable. True authenticity is not repetition. It's alignment, and alignment changes as you do. So the next time someone says, just be yourself, you need to ask, which self? The one shaped by fear, the one adapted to keep the peace, the one that avoids discomfort, or the one you haven't fully met yet, because you've been too loyal to the version that's been running the show? That's the self worth being. The one built from conscious decisions, not subconscious defense mechanisms. But there's a price. Being your real self, the aligned self, requires grief. You will have to mourn identities that felt familiar. You will have to disappoint people who were attached to your echo. You will have to question your preferences, your patterns, your labels. That's the path. And it's not popular, because it requires you to admit that the life you've been living might have been optimized for someone you no longer are. That's not a failure. It's an awakening. Let's talk about how this lie keeps spreading. It sounds noble. It appeals to your desire to be accepted. It tells you that who you are is enough, that you shouldn't have to change to be loved. And there's truth in that if we're talking about the real you. But most people aren't being rejected for who they are. They're being accepted for who they're pretending to be. That's the tragedy. You've built relationships, careers, habits, and dreams based on a version of you that was crafted to survive, not thrive. So when people say, just be yourself, you hold on. Because losing that identity feels like losing everything you built around it. But here's the paradox. Letting go of the echo won't erase your life. It will finally make it yours. And yes, that means shedding. It means revisiting places in yourself that were locked away when you first started performing. It means silence, reflection, choosing truth over comfort. It means asking, who am I when I stop trying to be consistent with my past? Who am I when I stop calling survival patterns personality traits? Who am I when I choose my future over my familiarity? That is where your identity begins. Not in the echo, but in the echo's absence. You may have been told that authenticity is the destination. It's not. It's the starting point, and it only becomes real once you stop confusing the echo with the essence. Now that you've begun seeing how dangerous the phrase, just be yourself, can be. Now that you understand how it reinforces a version of you formed by past pressure, not present alignment. Now that you've questioned the voice that tells you who you are without letting you grow. You're ready to confront the origin. Next, we will uncover the moment this echo self was born. Not in random chaos, but in precise, defining moments that froze your identity in place. It's time to go to the source, to see not just how you became this version of you, but why. And once you know the why, you'll finally understand the power of letting go. Now that the illusion of just being yourself has been peeled away, the next truth must be faced brutally and directly. There was a moment, a very specific moment, when the real you went quiet, and something else stood up in your place. That moment didn't feel dramatic at the time. There were no warning bells, no movie score crescendo, but something changed. You adapted, you protected yourself, and in doing so, you started becoming someone else. This is the moment the echo self was born. To understand why the echo exists, you have to go back to when it first emerged. Most people think identity is shaped over time. That's partially true. But it's not time that shapes identity, it's reaction. Your identity was shaped by your response to pressure. Specifically, emotional, psychological, or social pressure you didn't have the tools to process. In these high-stakes moments, your nervous system made the only choice it could. Shrink, soften, silence, comply. Maybe it happened when you were told you were too much. Maybe it was when you were laughed at for being expressive. Maybe it was when your emotions weren't believed or were met with coldness. Whatever it was, you froze. And in that freeze, a mask formed. The echo self isn't something you chose. It's something that was chosen for you when your nervous system couldn't hold your truth anymore. And here's the critical part. In that moment, you didn't just decide to act differently. You decided that who you really were was unsafe. Let that sink in. You didn't just pivot. You buried. You buried the real self and installed a safer version. That safer version got results. Fewer conflicts. More praise. Less chaos. It worked. But it cost you. Because now, decades later, you're still operating from that same template. Still reacting from that same frozen place. Still protecting a version of you that hasn't been relevant for years. That's the cost of unresolved adaptation. It calcifies. What was meant to be temporary becomes permanent. What was once protection becomes identity. Let's break this further. The echo self was built not just from trauma but from labels. Every label you were given in those early moments. You're sensitive. You're selfish. You're the responsible one. You're difficult. You're not a leader. You always take things too far. Those weren't just words. They were blueprints. And you didn't just hear them, you built your identity around them. The echo is the structure you created to live within those labels safely. And the tragedy? You still live inside that structure, even though it's too small, even though it doesn't fit, even though it limits every version of the life you're now trying to build. This isn't a failure of willpower. It's a lack of awareness. Because if you don't know who built your house, you'll keep renovating it instead of leaving it. There's a phrase that often sounds harmless. I've always been this way. But when you unpack it, you often find this. It's not truth, it's trauma. You're not just that kind of person. You're someone who learned to stay small in exchange for peace. And now, you're still trading your potential for that same peace. Even when the original threat is long gone. Your nervous system doesn't know the danger is over. It only knows the pattern. So it repeats it. And you stay locked in a self-image that was designed to survive a version of the world that no longer exists. Let's take a closer look at how this freeze shows up now. You want to speak up, but the echo reminds you of the time your voice made someone uncomfortable. You want to lead, but the echo plays a memory of failure, awkwardness, or judgment. You want to rest, but the echo says, if you slow down, you'll fall behind. This is not just overthinking. It's memory. Your body remembers what your mind has normalized. You're not stuck in indecision. You're stuck in a moment that trained you to fear being whole. That's the real freeze. Not physical paralysis, but identity paralysis. A looping pattern that forces you to become a curated version of yourself every single day. So how do you begin to break it? First, you name it. Not with shame, not with judgment, but with clarity. Start asking yourself, whose voice told me I had to be this way? What moment did I decide that being authentic was dangerous? What label have I been carrying that I never agreed to in the first place? This isn't about reliving trauma. It's about reclaiming authorship. Because until you rewrite that first decision, the decision to become someone safer, quieter, easier, you will keep attracting situations that match your adaptation instead of your alignment. And that misalignment will feel like sabotage, burnout, or confusion, when in truth, it's just your soul rejecting a script it never agreed to. Let's be blunt here. You cannot create a future with a self that was designed in fear. You cannot build abundance on an identity that was formed in lack. You cannot lead from a voice that was trained to whisper. That version of you is not wrong, but it is expired. And now you must choose. Remain consistent with who you had to be, or become loyal to who you actually are. The echo was born in a moment of protection. The real you will be born in a moment of truth. That moment is now. Next, we will explore how the adaptations didn't stop at your thoughts. They became armor. Layers you wore so well, you forgot they were never skin. It's time to see the survival masks for what they really are. The armor you don't know you're wearing. Survival masks. By now, you've begun to see how the echo self formed in response to moments of emotional overwhelm, unprocessed shame, or sudden silence. But the echo wasn't content with just rewiring your thoughts. It needed to protect itself. It needed to remain undetected. And to do that, it needed armor. This armor became what you now think of as your personality. But it's not. It's a collection of masks. Elegant, believable, sophisticated forms of camouflage you crafted without even realizing it. You wore them so well you began to think they were you. But they're not. They're roles, scripts, responses, and the most dangerous part, they work. Let's talk about the most common survival masks. 1. The overachiever. This mask tells you that success equals safety, that if you just keep performing, producing, achieving, you'll be too valuable to be abandoned. But it's never enough, because it wasn't built on purpose. It was built on prevention. 2. The caretaker. This mask tells you that your worth is directly tied to how needed you are. You become indispensable but invisible. Your needs are always secondary, and slowly you vanish. 3. The comedian. Humor becomes your defense. You can deflect pain. You can control a room, but you're always performing, and no one really knows what hurts. 4. The intellectual. You use logic to dominate emotion. You analyze everything. You feel powerful by knowing, but numb from not feeling. 5. The peacemaker. You stay neutral. You silence yourself to keep others comfortable. You become agreeable, passive, restrained. Conflict terrifies the mask, because exposure feels like death. Each of these is armor. Each of these protected you. But now, each of them blocks your alignment. The reason this armor feels permanent is because it was rewarded. You got praise, recognition, acceptance, peace, and your nervous system recorded all of it. So now, when you try to remove it, you feel exposed, vulnerable, naked, because the mask became your safety, not just socially but biologically. And yet, every dream you've ever had lives beyond that armor. Here's the test. If removing the mask makes you feel terrified, that's the one you've mistaken for your face. If challenging the mask feels like betrayal, that's the one controlling your life. The truth is, the more committed you are to wearing armor, the less accessible your alignment becomes. Because alignment requires transparency, and armor was designed to block transparency at all costs. Let's be clear, the masks aren't wrong. They were brilliant adaptations. They were necessary in the environments that created them. But now, they are outdated technologies trying to run a current version of you. And you can feel it. The glitch, the friction, the silent frustration of living in a body that's stuck performing old scripts. You weren't meant to live behind armor. You were meant to create from wholeness, not defend against exposure. And to do that, you must remove what once protected you, so you can access what now empowers you. Next, we will explore a harsh but essential truth. The version of you that could succeed cannot coexist with the one you've built for safety. A choice must be made. You've come far already. You've seen how the echo was born. You've traced it to the moment you froze. You've met the masks that have been running your personality. And now it's time to confront a deep contradiction. One you've likely felt but maybe never understood. There are two versions of you in constant conflict. The version of you that was built for protection, and the version of you that was designed for success. Here's the hard truth. They are not compatible. The version of you that could step into expansion, freedom, prosperity, and power is being suffocated by the version of you designed to keep the peace, avoid rejection, and survive. You can't have both. One will always sabotage the other. And until you choose, you will live in quiet conflict, torn between progress and preservation. Let's break this down. Every dream you hold that feels exciting. Every calling that feels magnetic. Every vision of your future that's bold, unapologetic, and rich in meaning. That version of you already exists. Not as a fantasy, not as a maybe, as a blueprint, a frequency, a reality waiting for your agreement. But here's the problem. The self you've constructed, the one based on safety, social survival, and adaptive personality traits, is completely unequipped to live in that reality. Why? Because it wasn't designed for it. It was designed for control, not expansion. It was designed to limit risk, not increase reach. It was designed to minimize visibility, not magnify impact. It was designed to maintain approval, not challenge status quos. And so, when you try to move toward the version of you that was built for success, that old self starts a full-blown rebellion. You don't notice it immediately. It shows up as hesitation, overthinking, sudden fatigue, strange anxiety, unexplainable guilt. You sabotage progress without realizing what's happening. Not because you're broken, because the old self feels threatened. Let's be precise here. You didn't create the echo self to thrive. You created it to be tolerated. And now, you're trying to lead a thriving life, while staying in a shape that was molded for tolerance. This is why success often feels emotionally violent, feels unsafe. You start to shine, and suddenly you feel exposed. You begin to receive more, and suddenly you feel fraudulent. You attract new opportunities, and suddenly you feel pressure to prove. It's not the opportunity causing the discomfort. It's the friction between your true design and your outdated identity. Think of your life like a house. You built this house to withstand storms. You chose narrow doors, low ceilings, thick walls, few windows, kept you protected. But now you want to bring light in. You want open spaces. You want views. You want guests. The structure won't allow it. So now you're trying to host a future in a house that was built for hiding. And it's cracking under the pressure. You're not broken. You're misaligned. Here's what happens when you keep trying to force it. You shrink your goals to fit the identity you're familiar with. You delay action so you don't feel disloyal to your comfort. You tone down your brilliance so you don't activate rejection. You play small and call it strategy. You avoid visibility and call it humility. You self-sabotage and call it timing. But none of that is truth. It's adaptation trying to survive a destiny it wasn't designed to handle. Now ask yourself this: are you trying to achieve your dreams from a self that was built to avoid pain? Because if you are, then no matter how big the dream is, the execution will always feel off. Because your internal structure doesn't match the frequency of your future. That's why you burn out. That's why you feel stuck. That's why nothing feels fully yours. Because you're attempting to host evolution using an identity forged in contraction. It's time to say it plainly. The success you're built for, it hates the version of you you've built. Not because it's wrong, but because it's in the way. Success, alignment, and expansion are allergic to performance-based identities. They require truth, and truth feels unsafe to the echo. This is why you must choose. Stay loyal to the identity that helped you survive, or become faithful to the identity that can help you rise. You can't keep editing your dreams to accommodate the limits of a self that wasn't meant to walk in them. You must become the self that those dreams are actually waiting for. Next, we will examine the comfort in failure. Why the pain of staying stuck often feels safer than the possibility of success. And how familiar disappointment can become an emotional addiction. Now that you've seen the impossibility of aligning success with a survival-based self, a deeper tension rises to the surface. If success feels threatening, and stagnation feels familiar, then failure becomes comfort. Yes, failure, disguised as normal, masked as just how things are, becomes a place you return to because it's safe. Let's be real. Most people don't fear failure. They fear unfamiliar success. They fear being someone different. They fear becoming unrecognizable even to themselves. And so they return again and again to predictable struggle. Not because they like it, but because they know how to function inside it. Familiar failure feels like, I always get close, but something goes wrong. I'm good at starting, but not finishing. Everything works for a while, then I crash. These aren't personality quirks. They're subconscious commitments. Commitments to patterns, to identities, to emotional states that are known even if they're painful. It starts subtly. A minor delay, a little resistance, a distraction that seems innocent, but it grows. You start creating emotional friction on purpose. You pick a fight. You procrastinate. You isolate. You make yourself too busy to succeed. Why? Because the real you threatens the echo. And the echo knows that failure, however disappointing, is familiar. And familiarity is safety. Let's take this deeper. The reason familiar failure feels better than unknown success is because of one thing: emotional preparation. You've practiced failure. You know how it feels. You know how to explain it. You even know how to earn sympathy for it. But success? You don't have a script. You don't know how to handle praise without shrinking. You don't know how to receive abundance without guilt. You don't know how to be seen without feeling exposed. So what do? You fail just enough to stay believable. Just enough to keep the people around you comfortable. Just enough to stay inside the lines of who you've always been. This is emotional addiction. Addiction to the known, to the predictable, to the emotionally rehearsed version of life. You've rehearsed rejection more than receiving. You've rehearsed scarcity more than surplus. You've rehearsed retreat more than rising. And your body follows what it rehearses, not what you affirm. not what you dream, but what you practice. This is why mindset shifts don't work when they're built on top of unexamined identity loops. You're speaking abundance while rehearsing loss. You're visualizing growth while preparing for collapse. You're declaring breakthroughs while protecting the version of you that wouldn't survive them. It's time to ask the hard question. Is the pain you're experiencing chosen pain? Because if you can predict your breakdowns, if you can finish the sentence, I always mess up when, if you know the exact moment you'll back out, hesitate, quit, or implode, then it's no longer a failure. It's a decision. And as long as you're more committed to familiarity than truth, you will continue choosing it, not consciously, but emotionally, because it's the only pain you've ever fully made room for. To change this, you don't need more goals. You need a new emotional home, a nervous system that feels safer in success than in sabotage, a self-image that accepts ease, grace, visibility, and abundance as normal, not exceptional, not rare, normal. And that begins by treating failure not as a problem to fix, but as a comfort to interrupt. You don't need to solve your blocks. You need to stop rehearsing them. You don't need to understand your fears. You need to stop returning to them as home, because your future cannot live in a nervous system that's addicted to repeating the past. Next, we will reveal the truth about what you call self-sabotage. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's loyalty to a former self you haven't realized you've outgrown. By now, you've seen how familiar failure acts as emotional gravity, pulling you back into a reality you already know how to survive. And the truth gets sharper here. That pull isn't laziness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not even fear in the way you think. It's loyalty. You're not sabotaging your progress because you're incapable of succeeding. You're sabotaging your progress because a part of you still feels committed to the version of yourself that wasn't allowed to. Let's unpack this. Loyalty is a powerful emotional contract. It's not loud. It doesn't shout for attention. It whispers. And in the case of the echo self, it whispers things like, if you grow, who will you leave behind? If you change, will you still be lovable? If you succeed, what happens to the story that made you feel seen? That's the tension. You say you want freedom, but freedom would mean breaking ties with identities, relationships, environments, and expectations that once gave you something, even if that something was pain. Because pain, when it becomes your identity, starts to feel like purpose, and stepping away from it feels like betrayal. So you begin to stall, not because you're not ready, but because you're loyal. Let's make this concrete. Think about a moment when you were on the verge of something big, a new business, a big opportunity, a healthier relationship, and then, out of nowhere, you stopped. Not because you weren't capable, but because your inner narrative started asking questions like, is this really you? Do you deserve this? Won't people think you've changed? That's not fear. That's your echo self checking for loyalty. And the moment you shrink back, it's reassured. We're still together. You haven't left me behind. This is the hidden cost of personal evolution. Progress requires grief, because to move forward, you must release the version of you that once earned love through struggle. That version might have been the strong one, the quiet one, the fixer, the overachiever. And you don't just abandon that identity without consequence. You feel it, in your bones, in your guilt, in your hesitation. You're not just changing habits, you're breaking emotional contracts. And those contracts don't dissolve quietly. One of the most dangerous contracts is this: I won't rise too far, so I never leave anyone behind. Whether it's family, community, or your old self, you keep yourself in emotional range of those who knew you before you grew, because it feels cruel to evolve when others are still stuck. So you begin to self-regulate your greatness. You sabotage the good. You delay the next step. You hide your power under the guise of patience, humility, or responsibility. But let's call it what it really is: emotional loyalty to a version of life you no longer belong in. The truth is, you will not become who you're meant to be without being misunderstood. You will not remain connected to every version of your past without betraying your future. You will not stay fully safe and also fully seen. That's the choice. And the moment you choose alignment over old loyalty, you will feel loss. That's normal. That's expected. But it's also the signal that you're breaking through a loop instead of obeying it. Let's look at the behaviors that often get labeled as self-sabotage. You procrastinate on the very things that could elevate you. You avoid being fully seen, even when you crave visibility. You delay decision-making until the opportunity expires. You create conflict right before breakthroughs. You say yes to old patterns that no longer fit. Every single one of those isn't random. They're signs of emotional loyalty. They're proof that a part of you is still honoring the ghost of who you used to be. And that ghost is not evil. It's wounded. It's familiar. And it wants to be remembered. But remembering the past doesn't mean repeating it. It means honoring what you needed then and choosing what you deserve now. You're not sabotaging yourself. You're preserving a connection to an old role, to a lost version of home, to a pattern that helped you survive. But you're not surviving anymore. You're supposed to be building, thriving, leading, and you cannot do that from a place of divided allegiance. The future won't bloom in loyalty to the past. You must choose. And the moment you do, the sabotage starts to fall away. Not because you've become more productive, but because you've finally become free. Next, we will explore the hidden reason letting go of the echo self feels like betrayal. Not just of an identity, but of the love that once validated it. The lies you keep because they loved you once. Now that the emotional contracts have been exposed, the loyalty you've mistaken for sabotage, it's time to explore something even more tender. You're not just holding onto the echo self because it's familiar. You're holding onto it because it was once loved. And when love validates an identity, that identity becomes sacred. Even if it's false, even if it's painful, even if it no longer fits. This is one of the most invisible blocks to growth. You don't want to become someone else, because you're afraid of losing the love that was only ever given to the version of you that was less. Let's say you were praised for being the responsible one, always holding things together, always available, always fixing. Or maybe you were admired for being quiet, agreeable, low maintenance. Or maybe you were affirmed for your struggle. People saw you fight and they cheered. People saw you suffer and they connected. And now, you're trying to grow. But part of you knows, if I stop being this version of me, I might stop being lovable. Because the love I received came with a condition. Stay small, stay quiet, stay broken, stay predictable. So you keep the lies. Not because you believe them, but because they come attached to the only forms of connection you've ever trusted. This is how love gets weaponized without intention. People love the version of you that's safe for them, not necessarily the version that's true for you. And you learn, slowly and subconsciously, that truth equals risk. So you adapt. You become lovable instead of honest. You become needed instead of expressive. You become accepted instead of aligned. And the lie grows. It becomes your personality, your brand, your role. And if you're not careful, it becomes your identity. This is why letting go of the echo hurts so much. Because when you release the mask, you often lose the audience that was clapping for it. You lose the familiarity of being needed for something you no longer want to be. You lose the connection that was built on a version of you that you now feel suffocated by. And that's grief. That's real. And that's necessary. Because true transformation doesn't just build something new. It breaks something sacred, not out of malice, but out of alignment. You must let go of the love that required your limitation. You must release the praise that required your pain. You must mourn the applause that depended on your performance. Here's how you begin. Start telling the truth. Not loudly, not defiantly, just clearly. Start with yourself. I don't want to be needed like this anymore. I don't want to keep being quiet to keep the peace. I don't want to stay loyal to roles I didn't choose. Then bring that truth into your relationships. Not everyone will like it. Some will push back. Some will question. Some will distance. Let them. You are not required to keep being who people expect you to be just because they once gave you love. The real ones will adjust. The true ones will stay. And new ones will find you, because your signal will finally match your essence. But the echo must go. Not in anger, not in shame, but in love. Because the most loving thing you can do for your old self is stop pretending that version of you still fits. Next, we will confront the forbidden territory, the success you're not even allowed to want, because it would make you too different, too visible, and too free. It's time to identify the desires you've placed off limits. Now that you've uncovered the lies you protected because they were once loved, you're ready to face the unspoken boundaries you've placed around your own potential. Not the limits someone else set, the ones you silently agreed to, agreements you made deep inside your nervous system without ever using words. These are the limits of what you've allowed yourself to desire, and more dangerously, what you've allowed yourself to have. You might be surprised to learn that the most potent success you're capable of isn't just something you haven't achieved yet. It's something you've made emotionally off limits. Why? Because true success, deep, holistic, undeniable success would disrupt everything. It would expose how much of your current life has been engineered to maintain the echo. It would draw a line through every room that was built around your limitation. And that feels dangerous. So what do? You subconsciously filter your dreams. You keep them realistic. You repackage your goals to avoid triggering discomfort in others. You chase versions of success that don't demand a full identity shift, only small performance upgrades. But you never touch the raw, explosive, undeniable version. The version that would require you to become unrecognizable. That version is placed in a vault. Not because it's too far away, but because it's too emotionally expensive. Here's how this plays out in real life. You say you want wealth, but only enough to be comfortable. Not enough to feel separate from your circle. You say you want to be seen, but only enough to inspire, never enough to polarize. You say you want deep love, but only if it doesn't require full emotional transparency. You place conditions on your desires, not because you don't want more, but because you were taught that certain types of more come with a cost you're not prepared to pay. Loss of belonging, fear of jealousy, risk of criticism, guilt for having what others don't. So you self-regulate. You reach, but only so far. You rise, but not too visibly. You dream, but edit along the way. Let's call this for what it is, an unconscious agreement to stay safe even if it means staying small. This is the deeper work. To admit that you have placed limits around your destiny not because they are necessary, but because they are familiar. And in doing so, you've blocked the very levels of success that are not just possible for you but natural. Success isn't supposed to feel like pressure. It's supposed to feel like alignment. But alignment can only happen when you allow the real you to surface without edits, without apologies. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I actually become the version of me who gets everything I've said I wanted? The answers will reveal the cost you've been trying to avoid. Maybe it's the fear that you'll become alone, or judged, or disconnected from those you love. And maybe, at a deeper level, it's the fear that if you get everything, you'll no longer have excuses. You'll no longer have pain to hide behind. You'll no longer be able to say, someday. You'll be responsible for your joy. And that feels heavier than your struggle ever did. This is why the echo stays, not because it's strong, but because you haven't fully chosen to want what your soul truly craves. You've told yourself you want success, but internally you've negotiated down the terms. You've rewritten the vision to avoid disruption, and in doing so, you've guaranteed stagnation. So here's the work. You must start wanting what you actually want. Even before you know how to get it, even before you feel worthy of it, even before anyone else agrees it's appropriate. You must stop apologizing for the scale of your vision. You must stop compromising your desires to remain acceptable. You must stop filtering your joy to protect other people's insecurities. Because the cost of staying safe is everything you came here to do. And at some point you have to choose, preserve peace, or expand into power. Stay lovable in limitation, or become unshakable in truth. Avoid rocking the boat, or build your own ocean. Next, we will uncover how your dreams weren't denied, just delayed, because your echo self was waiting for permission. Now it's time to reissue that permission. No more applications. You decide. Now that you've seen how your success has been made emotionally off-limits, a liberating but confronting realization rises to the surface. The dreams you buried, the ones you secretly think about when no one is around, the visions you used to hold but gave up on because life got real, they didn't disappear, they expired. Not because they were impossible, not because they were wrong, not because you were foolish, but because you never updated the permissions. Let's get this clear. When you were younger, you made emotional decisions about what was possible. You applied for internal approval, and that approval was filtered through the lens of fear, scarcity, survival, and others' expectations. At that time, you were a different person. Limited resources, limited self-awareness, limited belief, but that version of you is still managing your dreams. The echo self is the outdated manager of your potential, and it's still holding the keys. So the dreams that could elevate your life are still waiting, but they're stuck in a file labeled denied, not because they're wrong, but because the system they were submitted to was too small to handle them. And now you have to reapply. Not because you need external validation, but because your internal access was blocked by an expired identity. That identity decided, you can't be that bold. You're not ready. People like you don't get that far. Keep it small. Keep it safe. And you listened, so you shelved the dreams. And you built a life around the smaller ones. But they never stopped echoing. They never stopped calling. Because alignment doesn't expire, only your access to it does. Let's break this open. There are dreams you've avoided not because they're unrealistic, but because they require a new level of self-ownership. You haven't reapplied because, saying yes would mean shedding the version of you that once said no. And that's terrifying. It would mean grieving wasted time, owning your power, disrupting your image, shaking up your stability. It would mean becoming someone whose life matches their truth, instead of someone who's still negotiating it. So you delay the reapplication. You act like you don't care anymore. You convince yourself it's not the right time. But it is. You're not early. You're not late. You're just ready. Let's get tactical. What expired dreams need to be reissued right now? Not as fantasies, but as truths. The version of you reading this isn't the same person who denied them. You have new awareness, new access, new authority. That means you're now qualified to say yes to what used to scare you. And no, not everyone will approve. Not every part of you will feel instantly aligned. But if the dream keeps coming back, it's not nostalgia. It's a signal. It's time. Here's the most important thing to remember. The permission doesn't come from the world. It comes from you. You don't need to be chosen. You don't need to be endorsed. You don't need someone to tell you it's okay. You just need to stop submitting your future to the system that was built by your past. No more expired identities holding your ambition hostage. No more echo selves deciding what's possible. No more maybe someday. Today is the only application that counts. And the approval has already been printed. You just need to show up and claim it. Next, we will reveal the loop you've been trapped in, why your life feels repetitive, even when you try to change, and how identity loops keep you stuck in a storyline you never agreed to. You've now seen how your biggest dreams have been placed on hold, waiting for a version of you bold enough to reissue permission. But here's the next trap we need to expose. Even when you try to change, even when you feel ready to evolve, even when the vision is clear and the desire is real, you keep ending up in the same place, same patterns, same emotional states, same quiet frustration. That's not because you're not growing. It's because you're living in a loop disguised as a life. Let's get direct. You are not stuck because you're lazy. You're stuck because your identity is running on code. A self-reinforcing, invisible system designed to keep you emotionally stable by keeping you circumstantially familiar. This loop is not maintained by willpower. It's maintained by identity preservation. You are trying to build a future from a self-image that refuses to die. And because of that, you keep recreating the same results even when you take different actions. Let's break down how this loop operates. It starts with a trigger. Something inspires you to rise. An idea, an opportunity, a goal. Next, you act. You start moving toward it. You get momentum, but then your nervous system does a scan. Is this familiar? Do we know how to exist here? Is this safe? And if the answer is no, you begin to generate friction, distraction, doubt, busyness, irritation, overthinking. Before long, you're back in a state you do recognize. A little overwhelmed, a little anxious, a little unclear, a little stuck. Then you label it, I must be doing something wrong, and the loop restarts. This isn't failure. It's a system rebooting. Every time you threaten to leave the loop, your echo self pulls you back. Not with force, but with familiarity. You tell yourself, maybe this isn't the right path. Maybe I need to try something else. Maybe it's just not meant to be right now. But the truth is, you've never left the loop. You just changed the set design. The background changes, the emotions stay the same. New situation, same cycle. Here's what makes this dangerous. Identity loops don't feel like prisons. They feel like normal life. That's why they're so hard to escape. You don't notice the trap because you're busy reacting to its symptoms. Exhaustion that rest doesn't solve. Clarity that disappears under pressure. Confidence that vanishes when opportunity knocks. You treat these like problems to fix, but they're just indicators that your loop is active. You are stuck in a self that's looping back to its original condition. Familiar emotional survival. To break the loop, you don't need a better routine. You don't need another plan. You need an identity interruption. That means recognizing when the loop is happening, while it's happening, and refusing to cooperate with the pattern. You stop assigning meaning to the friction. You stop calling the discomfort a sign. You stop interpreting the emotion as a reason to quit. You see it for what it is, a feedback signal from your echo self trying to restore control. You don't negotiate with it. You don't reason with it. You let it make noise and you keep moving anyway. Let's take this further. You are not looping because of a lack of vision. You are looping because of a lack of identity expansion. Until you create a self-image that includes your next level as normal, not fantasy. Your nervous system will fight it. Not maliciously, mechanically, because your nervous system's job is not to make you happy. It's to keep you alive. And if it only knows how to survive in stress, scarcity, or smallness, then success will feel like danger. Not because it is, but because the loop has never been broken. This is where awareness becomes your superpower. Start tracking the exact moment the loop reactivates. When do you start self-sabotaging? What patterns repeat in your relationships? What emotional states feel normal, even when you hate them? Don't fix them. Name them. When you name the loop, you begin to unplug its power. And when you act in contradiction to it consistently, you force a system update. Here's the real breakthrough. Your loop isn't held together by fate. It's held together by participation. You've been cooperating with an identity script you didn't write. You can stop. You can reject the assignment. You can exit the loop. Not all at once, but by refusing to become the version of yourself that expects pain. Because until you change what you expect, you'll keep recreating what you've rehearsed. Next, we will examine why your echo self thrives in emotional chaos, and how your nervous system might actually be addicted to crisis as a way to keep the loop alive. Now that you understand how identity loops work, you're likely beginning to notice a strange but consistent pattern. Just when things start to get better, you panic, you shut down, you start unnecessary conflict, you find something wrong, you start to search for drama. Why? Because your echo self thrives in emotional chaos. Not because it enjoys pain, but because it understands how to function there. Let's be brutally honest. Chaos can feel like home. Crisis can feel like clarity. When you're in a problem, everything is clear. You know what to focus on. You know what to talk about. You know what to feel. But when things are calm, you don't know who to be. You don't know what to do with joy. You don't know how to live without adrenaline. So your nervous system searches for ways to reintroduce instability. That's not dysfunction. That's programming. The echo self was built inside environments that rewarded survival. So now it feels activated when there's a problem to solve, and lost when there isn't. That means you've become emotionally calibrated for chaos. And when things get too stable, too peaceful, too aligned, your system gets bored, restless, anxious. It interprets peace as emptiness. And so you reintroduce noise. You stir the pot. You create deadlines. You make messes. You pick people who destabilize you. You ignore the simplicity that could free you, because the echo needs movement even if it's madness. Let's name some common chaos cravings. Last-minute scrambling before deadlines. Procrastinating just enough to feel the rush. Dating people who create emotional roller coasters. Overcommitting so you can feel important. Starting fires just to feel needed when you put them out. These aren't personality quirks. They're crisis conditioning. You were trained to operate best when things are falling apart. Because that's when your identity felt most validated. I'm good in chaos. I do my best work under pressure. I shine when the stakes are high. Those statements are red flags. They're confessions that you've built competence in dysfunction. And now peace feels like a threat. This is why stillness makes you uncomfortable. It's not boring. It's exposing. It shows you who you are without a problem to fix. And for the echo self, that's terrifying, because its entire purpose is to manage risk. When there's no risk, there's no role. So it stirs the pot, not to harm you, but to stay alive. So how do you shift this? By no longer waiting for crisis to unlock your clarity. You stop assigning urgency to value. You stop needing panic to feel powerful. You stop needing noise to feel worthy. You choose peace. You choose boredom. You choose simplicity and stay there. Not forever, but long enough to train your body that success doesn't require chaos. You begin to normalize calm. You build systems instead of surviving storms. You make progress from presence, not panic. And the more you do this, the more the echo begins to fade. Because its power doesn't come from force. It comes from repetition inside chaos. Break that, and the echo loses oxygen. Next, we will challenge one of the most popular but misleading healing models. Why some inner child work may actually be reinforcing the very prison you're trying to escape. Now that you've seen how the echo self thrives inside chaos and instability, it's time to explore one of the most subtle traps in the modern healing journey. It's a trap that often disguises itself as progress. It feels therapeutic. It feels compassionate. It feels like you're doing the work. But beneath the surface, it may be reinforcing the very prison you're trying to escape. Let's talk about the inner child. More specifically, the phantom inner child, the one your echo self uses to keep you in emotional loops under the guise of healing. Before you resist this, let's make one thing clear. Acknowledging your inner child isn't wrong. It's powerful. It's often necessary. The problem isn't the concept. It's how that concept gets weaponized by your own identity loop. Your echo self doesn't care how you stay stuck. It only cares that you stay stuck. And if it has to use healing language to keep you in emotional rehearsal, it will. Here's how it happens. You begin doing inner child work. You start revisiting moments of pain. You begin identifying your unmet needs. You allow yourself to feel what wasn't safe to feel then. So far, so good. But instead of healing through those states, you begin to build a new identity around them. You start leading with the wounds. You begin excusing patterns as this is just my trauma. You start protecting the inner child instead of integrating them. And just like that, you've built a new prison. A softer one. A well-decorated one. But still a prison. This is the phantom inner child. Not the real one. Not the one who needs love, safety, and closure. The phantom is the role you play when the wounded version of you becomes the star of your story. instead of the chapter you've grown from. It's a false authority based on emotional history. It says, because I was hurt then, I need protection now. Because I was silenced then, I need full control now. Because I was abandoned then, I must avoid all risk now. That sounds rational. It sounds reasonable. But it's still being run by fear. And fear, no matter how justified, should never be the leader of your life. Let's pause here. There is real grief that deserves space. There is real pain that deserves tenderness. There are emotional truths that deserve validation. But there's a difference between visiting the past to retrieve yourself and building your identity around it. The echo loves when you stay loyal to the wounded version of you, because that version won't challenge anything. It won't risk. It won't shine. It won't disrupt. It will keep you soft, cautious, emotionally fragile, and busy with self-analysis. And in that state, you become emotionally fluent, but energetically stagnant. You can talk about your pain for hours, but you can't build the future that was meant to transcend that pain. Here's a confronting truth. At a certain point, healing becomes a stall tactic. Not because healing is wrong, but because it becomes your full-time identity. You become the one who's always working on themselves, but never actually arriving, never stabilizing, never stepping into clarity, power, or unapologetic forward movement. That's not healing. That's hiding behind language, behind softness, behind endless processing. So what's the solution? Integration. You stop overprotecting the inner child. You stop using their voice to justify your fear. You stop using your trauma as a permission slip to stay confused. Instead, you say, I see you. I love you. I honor you. But you don't run this anymore. Then you become the adult. The one who builds, the one who leads, the one who parents the child instead of becoming them again. Let's take this further. If you've done deep emotional work, you might feel offended by this. You might think, but I've worked so hard to honor my past. Yes, and that work matters. But your past is not your personality, and your pain is not your purpose. You don't need to keep returning to the wound in order to prove that it happened. You don't need to speak from your scars to stay spiritually valid. You're allowed to step forward without constantly explaining your pain. That's not denial. That's graduation. Start asking yourself, is this healing, or is this rehearsing? Am I feeling this to release it, or am I looping it to stay loyal to the version of me that once needed it? Am I honoring my past, or am I building a new identity that centers it so I never have to move beyond it? Your inner child deserves to be seen, but they also deserve to see you grow. And they can't witness that growth if you keep pulling them to the front of the room every time your power begins to rise. It's time to stop centering the ghost. You are not broken. You are not fragile. You are not someone who always needs time to figure it out. You are ready. Next, we'll explore something unexpected. Why saying you want success but feeling pressure when it arrives is not contradiction. It's a biological resistance pattern, and we're going to dismantle it at the root. Now that the phantom of the inner child has been seen for what it is, a different pattern reveals itself, one that might explain every strange reaction you've had to progress. It's this: you say you want it, you even work for it, you affirm it, visualize it, declare it. But when success finally shows up, you feel pressure, you feel fear, you feel discomfort. That's not imposter syndrome. That's not bad timing. That's not self-sabotage. That's resistance. More specifically, success resistance. Success resistance is when your system begins to reject the very reality you've been working toward. It doesn't happen because you're ungrateful. It doesn't happen because you're not ready. It happens because the version of you that was programmed for survival doesn't know how to exist in this new experience. You haven't rehearsed peace. You haven't practiced thriving. You haven't normalized receiving. So when it arrives, your nervous system flinches. You feel heavy, not excited. You feel responsibility, not celebration. You feel anxiety, not ease. Because success doesn't just bring rewards. It brings new identity requirements. And if your echo self is still running the show, It sees this as danger, not progress. Let's break this down further. When you receive attention, do you feel exposed instead of seen? When you receive money, do you feel guilt instead of gratitude? When people admire your work, do you downplay it or deflect compliments? These are all forms of rejection, not of success itself, but of what success demands from your identity. It demands a self who can hold, who can sustain, who can be expanded and not collapse. If that self hasn't been built, the success will feel like sabotage even when it's aligned. So what do most people do? They backpedal. They say, I need to slow down. I'm not sure this is the right path. I just want balance. But balance in those moments is often code for retreat. You're not balancing your life. You're balancing your emotions because you've reached a threshold your identity can't handle yet. This is why strategy can't save you. No business plan, no time block, no vision board can fix what your identity won't allow. Until you become the person who can hold the success, you will keep pushing it away. You'll keep missing opportunities. You'll keep changing your mind, not because you're lost, but because your internal container isn't strong enough yet to hold what your external life is starting to deliver. So how do you fix it? You expand your container. You begin rehearsing safety in growth. You start building nervous system capacity for visibility, for wealth, for praise, for ease. You stop waiting for the feeling of readiness. You train it. That means doing the uncomfortable thing without drama. Letting success land and not running from it. Letting support arrive and not sabotaging it. Letting joy in and not bracing for it to end. You don't shrink when it gets good. You stretch. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to experience success without any internal recoil? No guilt, no fear, no need to explain. That's the goal. Not just success, but success without resistance. Success without apology. Success without disowning it the moment it lands. You are not scared of winning. You are scared of no longer needing the struggle to feel valid. But that's the next level. And it's waiting. Next, we will expose the deeper truth. The echo self cannot go with you. Your future isn't being delayed. It's being held back by someone you're still dragging along. You've now uncovered why success brings discomfort instead of celebration. You've seen how the body resists what the soul requests, and you've begun to realize that much of your hesitation isn't fear of the unknown. It's fear of who you'll have to leave behind. Here's the raw, unavoidable truth. The echo self cannot come with you. That's why you're stuck. Not because you're weak. Not because you're broken. Not because the dream is unrealistic. You're stuck because the part of you that got you here isn't qualified to lead you there. The echo self is efficient, predictable, resourceful. It knows how to keep the system running, even when the system is outdated. And that's the trap. Because the echo self doesn't show up as sabotage. It shows up as logic. It shows up as caution. It shows up as your personality. But when you stretch beyond its limits, when you begin aligning your external life with your internal truth, panics, not because it hates growth, because it wasn't built for it. Let's be specific. When you say yes to the new role, the echo self whispers, "You're not ready." When you begin asking for more money, it says, "Don't be greedy." When you take up space, speak up, stand tall. It shouts, "You've changed." And that voice has power, because for so long it was you. But now it's just a memory, a ghost, a set of rehearsed responses trying to pass as identity. And it's tired. Here's the truth that will set you free. You don't need to destroy the echo self. You just need to stop asking it to lead. You need to stop consulting it when you're making decisions for your future. You need to stop validating your potential through the lens of your protection mechanisms. You need to stop shrinking so the echo doesn't panic. Because the echo doesn't care about your alignment. It only cares about your comfort. And your comfort zone was never meant to hold your calling. The echo can't walk with you into success. Can't speak for you when you stand in truth. Can't build with you when you operate in power. Because those environments require clarity. and the echo thrives in distortion. Those environments require trust. And the echo thrives in suspicion. Those environments require presence. And the echo only knows reaction. So the more you grow, the more you'll feel this tension. Not because something's wrong, but because you're carrying someone who was never meant to survive your healing. This is the grieving part. You'll miss the echo. You'll miss the predictability. You'll miss the voice that used to calm you with rationalized excuses. Because it served you. It helped you. It shaped how you handled pain, rejection, and abandonment. But now it's blocking joy. It's interrupting expansion. It's defending a cage you no longer belong in. Letting go of the echo means letting go of emotional autopilot. It means feeling the new version of yourself form in real time. Awkward, exposed, honest. But that is where freedom lives. So what happens when you stop asking the echo for advice? When you stop looping its logic through every decision? You get silence. You get stillness. You get discomfort at first. But eventually, that space fills with truth. And you begin hearing a voice that isn't recycled. It isn't protective. It isn't scared. It's clear, grounded, direct, unapologetic. That's the voice that leads you forward. That's the self that can actually hold your future. Ask yourself this: who would I become if I stopped letting the version of me built in trauma decide what's realistic? What would I do if I stopped filtering my next step through the lens of emotional safety? How much longer will I keep dragging a version of me that was only ever meant to be temporary? It's not about becoming someone new. It's about releasing who you're not, so who you truly are can finally lead. Next, we'll explore how to know when you're finally aligned without guessing. There are signs. There are markers. And when you're living them, you won't need to ask. You've let the echo rest. You've stopped asking it to lead. You've begun shedding the patterns it kept you loyal to. And now something new begins to rise. But it feels different, less dramatic, less emotional, more still, more real. And that's the question. How do you know when you're finally aligned? How do you know it's not just another phase, another loop, another temporary high? How can you stop guessing and start knowing that this time, it's different? You learn the signals. Because alignment isn't vague. It's not a feeling you hope to catch. It's a state with markers. Clear, tangible, recognizable indicators that tell you, yes, this is the path. Yes, this is the version of you meant to succeed. Let's name them. 1. You feel peace before proof. When you're aligned, you don't need evidence to feel grounded. You don't need things to work out before you feel safe. The calm comes from within because it's no longer based on outcomes. 2. Clarity replaces urgency. You don't rush. You don't chase. You're not driven by fear of missing out or falling behind. You move with rhythm, not panic. You respond, not react. 3. Your energy is no longer leaking. When you're aligned, you stop needing to prove, defend, or explain. You no longer waste energy managing people's perception of you. You feel whole even when misunderstood. 4. Your decisions don't create identity drama. Aligned choices feel direct. You don't spiral after making them. You don't collapse into regret. You know what's yours and you say yes or no accordingly. 5. You attract from frequency, not force. You don't hustle for belonging. You don't beg for visibility. You begin drawing people, opportunities, and outcomes that match your new frequency. Because you're no longer broadcasting from fear. You're finally tuned to truth. And here's the unexpected part. Alignment often feels boring at first, because you've been trained to equate emotional chaos with growth. So when it gets peaceful, you second-guess it. But boredom isn't the problem. It's the detox. Your nervous system is recalibrating to a life where you're not constantly dodging emotional landmines. Give it time. That stillness will soon feel like clarity. That boredom will soon feel like breathing. That quiet will soon feel like truth. One more marker. Aligned action feels like remembering. It doesn't require convincing. It doesn't require pep talks. It feels like something inside you already knew. And now you're finally listening. This is when things start flowing. Not perfectly, but consistently. cleanly, honestly, and if you make a wrong turn, you correct without shame, because alignment doesn't mean always being right. It means always returning to truth. Here's your permission. Stop looking for signs in the world. Look for signals in yourself. When you're aligned, you're not confused. You're not exhausted. You're not endlessly chasing more. You're awake. You're settled. You're moving forward from a center that doesn't require noise. That's when you know. You're not in performance anymore. You're not echoing survival anymore. You've stepped into the life that was always waiting for the real you to arrive. Next, we'll confront why the echo identity begins to crack the moment you gain clarity, and how that clarity, while freeing, can also become the echo's greatest threat. You've felt the shift. You've stopped operating from performance. You've begun living from alignment. Your body is quieter. Your decisions are cleaner. But right as the momentum builds, you'll notice something subtle and sharp, a flicker of fear, a tremor of doubt, a sudden sense of vulnerability. It appears when you begin to clearly define who you are, when you stop being vague, when you stop saying, "I'm figuring it out," when you finally stand and say, "This is who I am. This is what I want. This is what I no longer tolerate." That's when the echo begins to panic, because clarity cracks it open. Let's name it directly. The echo identity thrives in ambiguity. It needs you to stay flexible, not in wisdom, but in self-doubt. It feeds off of indecision, off of phrases like, "I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm just going with the flow. I'm waiting to see how things unfold." That may sound like ease, but often it's fear, disguised as openness, because clarity comes with risk. Once you define who you are, what you value, and what you're building, you lose your excuse to stay invisible. You lose your ability to bend in every direction. You lose your cover, and the echo knows that. So the moment you start getting clear, it scrambles, tells you, "Be careful. What if you're wrong? Don't box yourself in. Who do you think you are to claim that?" That's not guidance. That's the sound of the echo fracturing under the pressure of truth. You've likely felt this before. You made a decision. You finally said no. You drew a boundary. You owned a desire. You said something out loud you've only whispered in your head. And then panic, regret, second-guessing, maybe even self-sabotage. That's not because you did something wrong. It's because you touched something real. And realness is unbearable for the echo, because when truth shows up, the echo has no place to hide. Clarity is a mirror. It reflects everything: the vision, the values, the voice, the alignment, and also the compromises, the inconsistencies, the expired patterns. And that kind of visibility, it's terrifying when you've spent your life hiding behind performance, adaptation, and not wanting to be too much. So you retreat. You dull your edges. You say things like, "Well, I'm still exploring," or "I don't want to limit myself." And in that retreat, the echo breathes a sigh of relief. You're back in the fog, where it can thrive. Let's be clear. Clarity isn't confinement. It's freedom. It's the foundation alignment can finally build on. Without clarity, you'll keep attracting misalignment, because you've never set the frequency of your actual truth. Without clarity, you'll keep creating identities that almost feel like you, but never fully. Without clarity, you'll keep blaming the world for what your echo has been orchestrating. Here's what clarity really does. It eliminates misaligned opportunities. It repels relationships that were only meant to reinforce your echo. It breaks emotional cycles that required confusion to stay alive. It makes you unrecognizable to the systems that used to depend on your uncertainty. And yes, that can feel lonely, first, because when you stand clearly, you stop being available to everything you used to tolerate. And what's left? Silence. But that silence is not absence. It's space. Space for what matches the clarity. Space for what matches you. So here's the practice. Stop apologizing for knowing. Stop softening your certainty to make others feel safe. Stop trading your clarity for connection that only survives when you stay vague. It's okay to change. It's okay to be sure. It's okay to say, this is who I am today, and if that evolves, I'll redefine myself again. But I'm no longer living undefined just to keep others comfortable. That's not rigidity. That's sovereignty. Next, we'll reveal one of the most subtle tools the echo uses to survive. Microlies, the harmless-sounding phrases you use every day that silently reinforce your old self. You've started claiming your clarity. You've seen how that alone weakens the echo. But there's another layer that must now be stripped away. One that seems innocent on the surface but holds devastating influence over your alignment. Microlies, these are the quiet phrases, the passive habits, the subtle disclaimers and default responses that keep the echo in power. Not with violence, but with familiarity. Let's define what they are. Microlies are small, repeated untruths you tell yourself or others that sound reasonable, but are actually identity-preserving mechanisms. They sound like, I'm just tired. I'm not sure yet. I'll try. I'm not really that kind of person. I don't care either way. We'll see what happens. I'm okay. They roll off the tongue easily. They don't cause disruption. They keep conversations smooth. They keep expectations low. They keep your identity from ever being challenged. That's why the echo loves them. Because with every microlie you delay alignment. You reinforce the identity that doesn't need clarity. That doesn't need to risk. That doesn't need to show up. And with enough repetition, these lies become your script. And your script becomes your life. Let's go deeper. When you say, I'm just tired, what you really might mean is, I'm emotionally misaligned, and it's draining me. When you say, I'll try, what you really might mean is, I'm already planning my retreat but want to sound agreeable. When you say, I don't care, what you really might mean is, I don't want to reveal how much this matters because rejection would hurt. Each of these is a protective response. Not because you're dishonest, but because your identity still believes it's safer to be unclear. So you filter your truth. And with every filtered truth, you reinforce the echo. Here's the risk. Microlies don't just keep others comfortable. They keep you hidden from yourself. You stop hearing your own needs. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop creating from depth. Because every time you mute yourself, even in tiny ways, you turn down the signal of your alignment. And that signal is the only compass that can lead you forward. Let's do an audit. Where do you soften your yes? Where do you blur your no? Where do you pretend neutrality when your soul is screaming direction? It's time to call it what it is. A loyalty to an identity that doesn't want to be challenged. But you're here now. You're different now. You can speak a full truth. Not because it's always easy, but because it's always aligned. What would your life look like if you stopped saying anything that wasn't entirely true? Not in a harsh way, not in a brutal way, in a clean way. What if your yes was a whole yes? What if your no didn't require an apology? What if your presence wasn't diluted by narrative gymnastics designed to keep you agreeable? You would be unstoppable, not because you're louder, but because you're finally honest. That's the edge. That's the real you, not performative. Not filtered, just true. Next, we'll confront the most socially accepted trap of all, the comfort zone, and why it's not actually comfort. It's a carefully disguised compromise, designed to keep your life predictable at the cost of your purpose. You've seen how clarity threatens the echo. You've identified the microlies that keep you dimmed. You've begun to speak with a cleaner voice, truer intentions, and firmer presence. But there's a zone, one final fortress where the echo feels safest. A place so deceptively cozy you've probably confused it for self-care. A space you were taught to protect, defend, and even celebrate. Your comfort zone. But what if it was never comfort at all? What if your comfort zone is actually a compromise zone? A chamber where possibility is edited down to fit your history? Let's get blunt. What you call comfort is often just familiar suffering. Predictable anxiety, manageable self-doubt, painless mediocrity, not because you want less, but because you've learned how to function with it. You've trained yourself to be okay with partial, to tolerate absence, to live beneath your actual size. And in exchange for that predictability, you gave up freedom. This is not an attack on safety. Safety is sacred, but safety isn't always healthy. Some of your safest patterns are the most emotionally bankrupt. Some of your safest people are the ones who won't let you grow. Some of your safest routines are silent agreements to remain unseen. So let's rename it. The comfort zone is the compromise zone. It's where your soul barters with your history to avoid the pain of expansion. It's where your nervous system says, I know this isn't joy, but at least I know how to survive it. Look around your life. What have you tolerated in the name of comfort? A job that doesn't grow you? A relationship that shrinks you? A routine that numbs you? And every time you thought about leaving, something in you said, don't risk it. This is safe. That wasn't safety. That was compromise. And here's the danger. Every day you stay in that zone, your identity rewrites its limits. You start believing you were built for smallness. You start confusing preference with permission. But your spirit knows better. That restlessness, that agitation, that quiet ache when nothing is technically wrong, that's not boredom. That's your brilliance suffocating under the weight of compliance. Now let's go deeper. Why do people stay in the compromise zone? Because leaving it doesn't just require courage. It requires grieving. You have to let go of what kept you regulated. You have to walk away from people who knew the echo version of you better than the real one. You have to risk being misunderstood, judged, and alone for a while. But the cost of staying? It's your real life. Because no masterpiece was built in the compromise zone. No alignment ever bloomed in good enough. No truth ever flourished in emotional sedation. So what does leaving actually look like? It's not quitting everything. It's choosing one thing today that reflects your future, not your fear. It's saying no once, clearly. It's asking for more without apology. It's stepping into a room where you're not the smartest, safest, or most validated person and choosing to stay. Leaving the compromise zone is a practice. One small disruption at a time. And each time you stretch, your identity updates. Not just your goals. Your baseline. Until eventually expansion becomes your new neutral. One warning. The world will call you ungrateful. They'll say, why leave what's working? Why make it hard on yourself? And that's when you'll know you're getting close. Because the compromise zone always sends messengers to keep you in orbit. But you'll see them for what they are. Protectors of your past, not architects of your future. Next, we're going to expose one of the most cunning manipulations of the echo self. How it uses something beautiful, gratitude, to guilt you into stagnation. You've stepped out of the compromise zone. You've started challenging what you've normalized. You've begun feeling the tension of wanting more, even when life looks fine. But here comes the softest, most deceptive trap yet. The echo's final weapon of stagnation. Not fear, not doubt, not shame. Gratitude. Yes, gratitude. That sacred concept you've been told to practice. That beautiful emotion rooted in presence and humility. But in the hands of the echo, it becomes a leash. Let's talk about how this happens. You begin sensing that something more is calling you. A new level, a new identity, a new alignment. But then a voice creeps in. Shouldn't you be thankful for what you already have? Why ask for more when others have less? Who are you to want more than this? That's not spirituality. That's guilt, wrapped in the language of virtue. And it's one of the most effective tools the echo has. Because unlike shame, gratitude-based guilt feels noble. It makes you think that staying small is a form of spiritual discipline. That being low maintenance is a sign of emotional maturity. That asking for more is greed. Let's be clear. True gratitude fuels growth. It celebrates what is while welcoming what could be. But false gratitude cages you. It says, don't dream too loudly. Don't elevate too fast. Don't disrupt the status quo of your blessings. And soon you're no longer dreaming. You're just maintaining. Not because you're ungrateful, but because you've been guilt into stillness. Here's the test. If your gratitude makes you shrink, it's not gratitude, it's fear in costume. True gratitude expands you. It widens your capacity to hold more, to create more, to receive more. It doesn't ask you to choose between appreciation and aspiration. It teaches you to hold both. So why does the echo use gratitude this way? Because ambition threatens the echo's narrative. If you begin building something bolder, truer, freer, you'll leave the identity it worked so hard to protect. And rather than use force, it uses guilt. Because guilt doesn't push, it pulls. It makes you question your character. It makes you wonder if wanting more means loving less. But that's the lie. You can honor your past and still release it. You can love your life and still expand it. You can be grateful and hungry at the same time. Here's what to do when the guilt hits. Separate emotion from ethics. Just because you feel guilt doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Reframe gratitude as foundation, not ceiling. I'm grateful for this, and I'm ready for what's next. Watch your language. Cut the phrases like, I shouldn't complain. I'm lucky to even have this. Instead say, I'm thankful for this chapter, and I'm writing the next one with intention. That's alignment. That's honesty. That's how you grow without betrayal. You owe no one an explanation for your expansion, not even your past self. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to increase your standards. You're allowed to want something that no one around you understands. And you're allowed to be deeply, radically grateful without making that gratitude a prison. Next, we will expose how the echo sets an invisible upper limit on your success, and why you may only be receiving what your old identity is willing to handle, not what your aligned self is meant to hold. You've learned how gratitude, twisted by the echo, can quietly stall your momentum. Now we turn to a far more covert mechanism, one that doesn't keep you from success entirely, but limits how much of it you're allowed to experience. This is the success ceiling, the invisible barrier that defines how much love, joy, money, connection, peace, or visibility you subconsciously permit. Not consciously, subconsciously. And make no mistake, the echo built that ceiling, not because it hates success, but because it doesn't know how to survive beyond that point. Have you ever had a day where everything felt too good? Where you suddenly picked a fight, lost focus, sabotaged momentum, or created unnecessary drama? Not because anything was wrong, but because something in you couldn't handle how right it was. That's the ceiling. When you begin experiencing more peace than you're used to, when things start feeling aligned, when the chaos settles, when abundance starts flowing, your nervous system panics, your echo self reboots, and like a thermostat detecting the room is too warm, it activates cooling mechanisms to bring you back to the familiar level of safety. Not joy, not power, not wholeness, safety. Your success ceiling isn't just about how much you believe you can have. It's about how much your current identity can metabolize without feeling threatened. That's why so many wins feel heavy instead of energizing. Why recognition makes you recoil. Why money disappears as quickly as it arrives. Why you can manifest but not maintain. Because receiving and retaining success requires an identity shift, not a strategy shift. Let's name some ceilings. You might have a love ceiling. When connection deepens, you unconsciously distance yourself because intimacy once meant danger. You might have a wealth ceiling. When income increases, guilt kicks in because you were taught money corrupts or that it has to be earned through struggle. You might have a peace ceiling. When life gets calm, you stir the pot because you've only ever felt important during crisis. You might even have a visibility ceiling. When people start seeing your gifts, you downplay them because attention once led to rejection. Each of these ceilings exists for one reason. Your echo self has a survival map that says, this is how much of life you're allowed to experience safely. Go beyond it and alarms go off. The terrifying truth? The ceiling isn't real. It's inherited. It's learned. It's outdated. But it feels real because it's internalized. That's why self-sabotage often doesn't feel intentional. You're not consciously trying to ruin anything. You're unconsciously trying to regulate your emotional environment back to what your identity can handle. Here's what happens when you start rising. The echo self watches with suspicion. It waits for the moment to self-correct. And that correction comes through distraction, delay, or drama. Not because you're flawed, but because your inner thermostat hasn't been updated. You don't need more motivation. You need a new set point. So how do you raise your ceiling? First, awareness. Name where your growth consistently plateaus. Is it in relationships, visibility, wealth, consistency? Second, stop making your ceiling a personality trait. It's not just how you are. It's a setting, and settings can be changed. Third, stay in the expansion without panic. Breathe when it gets good. Stay when it gets silent. Hold when it gets big. The discomfort is just the echo recalibrating. It's not truth. It's memory. Start normalizing more. Not just desiring it, holding it, sustaining it, feeling safe with it. Because until your nervous system learns that more doesn't mean threat, you'll keep building lives that fit within a cage that's far too small for your potential. Next, we'll expose the operating system the echo uses to keep that cage in place. One that's quiet, invisible, and embedded in your every choice. Shame. You've now discovered the hidden success ceiling and how your nervous system is wired to maintain familiar limitations. But to fully dismantle that ceiling, you must address the power source behind it. That power source is shame. Not the explosive kind. Not the dramatic, overt humiliation you can point to, but the quiet, embedded, coded shame. The kind that runs silently in the background, guiding your thoughts, decisions, tone, and self-perception. Shame as an operating system. Let's define it clearly. An operating system isn't something you think about. It's what everything else runs on. It's the subconscious framework from which you make meaning. The foundation under your identity, behavior, expectations. And when that system is shame-based, even your highest intentions are filtered through unworthiness. So you don't just want love. You want love that proves you're enough. You don't just want success. You want success that justifies your existence. You don't just want peace. You want peace that erases your guilt. And that's not alignment. That's performance. Running on shame. How does shame actually speak? It whispers, don't take up too much space. Make sure they're okay before you say what you need. Keep it together. Don't be messy. You haven't earned that yet. You should know better. You're too much. You're not enough. These phrases don't scream. They hum. Soft enough to seem rational. Subtle enough to go undetected. But they are controlling your every move. Let's look at your habits. Do you over-explain? That's shame. Do you minimize compliments? That's shame. Do you wait for permission to act on your desires? That's shame. Do you avoid visibility in case someone disagrees? Shame again. And here's the most common sign. You're constantly negotiating your right to be here, to want what you want, to know what you know, to need what you need. That's not humility. That's shame disguised as modesty. Why does the echo love shame? Because shame creates predictability. When you're ashamed, you don't rebel. You don't expand. You don't disrupt. You stay small, apologetic, hesitant, performative. And in that state, you're manageable to systems, to people, to yourself. But you're also muted. So what's the antidote? Not arrogance. Not rebellion for rebellion's sake. But internal authority. The ability to make decisions without filtering them through the question, am I allowed to want this? You shift from asking, is this okay? To saying, this is true for me. You stop needing to prove your goodness. You start embodying your wholeness. You stop treating shame as a compass. You start treating it as a glitch, an old system, one you're no longer running. This doesn't mean shame disappears. It means it loses its authority. It means you hear the whisper and say, that's not me. That's the echo. And then you choose. not in reaction to shame, but in alignment with truth. Here's your power. You don't need to feel fully worthy before acting from it. You build worthiness through congruent action, through choosing what reflects your actual self. Even if the old code still protests, that's how shame gets replaced, one aligned action at a time. Next, we're going to pause and ask something crucial. Have you actually been healing, or just fixing symptoms while leaving your old system untouched? You've just uncovered how shame silently powers your choices. You've seen how deeply it's woven into your reflexes, tone, and self-perception. But now it's time to ask a far more confronting question, one that might explain why, even after all your effort, change still feels temporary. Have you been healing, or have you just been fixing symptoms? Because the echo self is smart. It knows how to evolve with your growth. And one of its most cunning adaptations is convincing you you're transforming, when all you're really doing is rearranging the furniture in a house you were meant to move out of. Let's clarify the difference. Fixing symptoms sounds like this: I keep procrastinating. I need to find a new productivity tool. I feel insecure. Maybe I need another self-love practice. I'm anxious again. Maybe I should meditate more. On the surface, this looks like self-awareness. It looks like taking responsibility. But under the surface, it's a performance of healing, without the architecture of transformation. Because all of that, the procrastination, the anxiety, the overthinking, the self-doubt, the people-pleasing, the burnout, they're not the root. They're the results of a system, a belief framework, an identity pattern still running in the background. Here's the metaphor: you keep putting out fires while ignoring the faulty wiring. And every time you extinguish one flame, another one sparks, not because you're failing, but because you're operating from the same identity trying to improve itself, instead of being replaced. That's why growth feels exhausting, because managing symptoms is never ending. But transforming the system, that's when relief begins. So what is a system? A system is the set of assumptions you hold about who you are, what the world expects from you, what's possible, what's dangerous, and what success will cost. It's the architecture beneath every behavior. It's the invisible map that tells you what's safe. It's how the echo maintains dominance, not through force, but through familiarity. And unless that system is interrupted, you'll keep fixing surface issues, while the identity that created them stays untouched. Let's walk through an example. You keep people-pleasing, so you start setting boundaries. You learn to say no. You feel empowered. But deep down, you still feel anxious after setting those boundaries. You question yourself. You apologize for being too direct. You explain more than you need to. That's not a boundary issue. That's a system issue. Because the deeper belief, the operating system, is still running a script that says, my value is tied to others' comfort. So while the surface changes, the core still pulls the strings. Real transformation happens when you stop asking, how do I fix this behavior? And start asking, what identity made this behavior necessary in the first place? That question burns. Because it doesn't just ask you to improve, it asks you to dissolve. To dissolve the systems, the scaffolding, the echo logic, the inherited survival strategies. And from that raw space, you begin building something new, not layered on top of dysfunction, but in place of it. So how do you move from symptom management to system replacement? Here's how. Stop treating behaviors as problems. They're not problems. They're messengers. Ask, what is this pattern protecting me from? Identify the core belief feeding the system. Examples: if I rest, I'll fall behind. If I speak up, I'll be rejected. If I'm visible, I'll be attacked. Challenge the validity of that belief. Whose voice is that? Is it even yours? Has it ever been tested in your current reality? Choose a new belief that threatens the system. This won't feel natural. It will feel risky, but it will break the loop. Take action aligned with the new belief even if it feels fake at first. This is how you update the system. Not through affirmation, but through alignment. This is the deep work. This is where the echo starts screaming. Because when you stop feeding the surface and begin replacing the root, the echo knows it's running out of time. But so does the real you, and that part of you, the one aligned with truth, freedom, and expansion, has been waiting to live without loops. Next, we're going to decode something you've likely never thought about consciously: how your actual words betray the echo's presence. The language you use every day holds clues, and it's time to decode the vocabulary of your false self. You've now learned the difference between fixing symptoms and replacing systems. You've seen how the root must shift, or you'll keep cycling through recycled struggles. But the echo isn't just hiding in your beliefs. It's speaking every single day, through your language. And if you don't recognize how it talks, you'll keep reinforcing it, not just in thought, but in sound. Because the echo self has a vocabulary, and you're probably fluent. Language is not just communication. It's identity. The words you use shape your emotional reality. They encode your assumptions about what's possible. They signal what role you've accepted in your own life. And the echo? It has favorite phrases, go-to expressions, default scripts. They sound casual. They sound normal. They sound humble. But they are, in fact, clues. Let's decode some common ones. I'm just trying to keep up. You've already agreed you're behind. I'm not really that kind of person. You're clinging to an outdated identity. We'll see what happens. You've surrendered authorship of your life. It is what it is. You've silenced possibility in exchange for numbness. I'm bad at that. You've confused unfamiliarity with limitation. That's just the way I am. You've mistaken repetition for truth. I should be grateful. You've equated settling with humility. Each of these statements reinforces the echo's grip. Not because they're evil, but because they're passive. They disconnect you from authorship. Now think about tone. Echo language is often dismissive of self, apologetic in tone, conditional in value. If I get this right, then I'm worthy. Passive in structure, I guess, sort of, kind of. Even your use of qualifiers. Maybe it's just me. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining this right. All of these signal, I'm not sure I'm allowed to take up space. That's not humility. That's identity leakage. So what happens when you start cleaning your language? You'll feel exposed. You'll feel dramatic. You'll feel like you're too much, because your nervous system is used to a tone of suppression. And truth, when spoken cleanly, feels intense at first. But eventually it feels accurate. Eventually it feels like air. So here's your practice. Audit your phrases. Catch your disclaimers. Rewrite your scripts. Stop saying, I'm trying. Say, I am. Stop saying, I don't know. Say, I'm learning. Stop saying, it's nothing. Say, it matters. Language is leverage. Use it. Because every time you speak as if you are still your echo self, you reinforce the very identity you're trying to release. But when your voice changes, your life changes. Because your world is built through the sentences you allow yourself to say out loud. Next, we'll go beyond sound and into consequence. Every time you've denied your true self, you've created something we'll now call identity debt. And it's time to calculate what you owe and cancel it. Now that you've discovered how your very language has been echo-coded, it's time to face a truth that may sting. Not to shame you, but to liberate you. Every time you chose to stay quiet when truth asked you to speak. Every time you played small when your alignment whispered, more. Every time you wore the echo self because it kept the peace. You made a withdrawal from your real self. And now we have to look at the balance. Because you are carrying identity debt. What is identity debt? It's the energetic and emotional deficit that accumulates when you repeatedly deny who you really are. To maintain safety, acceptance, or approval. It's not about guilt. It's about arithmetic. Every lie, emotional or spoken, costs you alignment. Every performance, however noble, costs you authenticity. Every time you co-signed the echo, you borrowed against your truth. And now, you're living in a version of life, designed to sustain someone you're no longer willing to be. That's the pain you feel, that friction, that restlessness, that quiet urgency. It's not failure. It's unpaid identity debt calling for resolution. Let's explore where this debt gets built. Relationships. You stayed longer than your soul wanted. You shaped yourself to be easier to love. You abandoned your needs to maintain connection. Career. You kept performing roles that misrepresented your core. You accepted opportunities that shrunk your voice. You said yes to things your truth said no to. Daily routines. You maintained rhythms that kept you busy but numb. You structured your life around expectations instead of alignment. You gave your peak energy to things that don't reflect your values. Internal dialogue. You questioned your knowing. You discredited your desires. You judged your emotions. And every single time, you paid a piece of yourself. Not because you're broken, but because you were loyal to an identity that felt safer to carry than to release. But here's the turning point. Debt can be cleared. It doesn't have to define your future. It doesn't require you to rewind your entire story. It simply asks for truth now, not penance, presence. So how do you begin to cancel identity debt? Step 1, acknowledge it without shame. This isn't about fault. This is about reality. Just like financial debt, you don't solve it by resenting it. You solve it by looking it in the eye. Step 2, trace the recurring payments. Where are you still saying yes when you mean no? Where are you over-delivering to maintain an old self-image? Where are you still pretending you're fine to avoid disrupting your ecosystem? These are open loops, recurring charges, identity subscriptions you haven't canceled yet. Step 3, audit your alignment, not your achievements. Stop asking, am I doing enough? Start asking, is this still me? Debt isn't just accumulated through failure. It's accumulated through unconscious continuation. Step 4, make a withdrawal for the self you've been ignoring. Say the thing. End the cycle. Rest when it's uncomfortable. Ask for more. Risk being misunderstood. These actions might feel expensive, but every time you choose them, you're paying you back. Here's what happens when you stop carrying this debt. Your decisions become cleaner. Your relationships become simpler. Your internal narrative stops needing constant justification. Because debt creates noise. And when it's gone, clarity arrives. And with clarity, momentum. So if you've been wondering why your life still feels heavier than it should, even though you've done the work, even though you've healed, even though you've evolved, check the balance. You might just be living on a borrowed version of self. One that's long overdue for closure. Next, now that you've begun shedding debt, we'll confront another paradox. How even growth can become the next mask. It's time to explore identity inflation. Now that you've begun releasing the weight of identity debt, you'll start to feel lighter, more honest, more available to truth. But beware. The ego, yes, even your evolved ego, has a sneaky trick. It takes the language of growth, healing, self-work, and turns it into performance. Creates a new echo, just more polished, more spiritual, more high-level. That's identity inflation. When growth becomes a costume. Let's define it. Identity inflation is when the idea of who you've become grows faster than your actual embodiment. It's when you start speaking from the version you wish you were, instead of the version you're currently grounded in. It's not lying. It's aspirational performance. It's trying to be the real you without integrating the foundation that sustains it. And this happens most often, right after you shed a heavy layer, because you're so ready to be done, so eager to claim your new level, that you try it on like a suit, before it fits your nervous system, your choices, or your environment. Here's how to tell when growth has become a costume. You use elevated language but still make decisions from fear. You coach others in boundaries but don't hold your own. You talk about truth but still mute yourself in familiar rooms. You repeat powerful quotes but avoid quiet moments with your own voice. You show up constantly, but collapse internally when no one is watching. That's not integrity. That's identity inflation. The new echo isn't loud or toxic. It's just performative. Why does this happen? Because real embodiment is slow. And slow feels dangerous to the parts of you that survived on speed. You're trying to prove the new self is real, instead of letting it become real organically. You're trying to bypass vulnerability by acting as the aligned self, rather than staying with the mess of becoming. And that mess is where truth lives. Here's the paradox. Trying to look aligned is the surest way to break alignment. Trying to perform growth is the fastest way to avoid integrating it. Because transformation is not a look. It's not a tone. It's not an aesthetic. It's a series of unsexy, consistent, regulated, often invisible choices that match the identity you're stepping into, not just when people are watching, but especially when they're not. So how do you correct identity inflation? Tell the truth, especially to yourself. Are you saying things that sound evolved, but acting from the echo's logic? That's okay. Call it. That's where embodiment begins. Stop performing clarity. It's okay to say, I don't know yet. It's okay to say, I'm still learning how to live this. That's more powerful than pretending you're already there. Slow down your integration. Let your nervous system adjust. Don't rush to become visible with a truth you've barely lived. Test it quietly. Live it privately. Then let it radiate naturally. Let go of the need to constantly signal evolution. You don't need to tell people who you are becoming. You don't need to prove you're better than before. You just need to show up congruently, over and over, quietly if needed, loudly when aligned. The most powerful version of you isn't loud. It's accurate, and accuracy can't be faked. It must be lived. Next, we'll confront the mirror, not just literally but energetically, because what you think you see when you look at yourself is likely still a lie, filtered through fear. It's time to see who's really looking back. You've seen how growth can quietly mutate into performance, how the echo self can evolve into a more sophisticated version of denial. Now, we move to one of the most persistent illusions of identity, your reflection. Because when you look in the mirror, you're not seeing truth. You're seeing a filter, not digital, psychological, not based on fact, but fear. This is the mirror lie. You don't see who you are. You see who you fear you still are. Think about it. When you see yourself on camera, when you hear your voice, when you step in front of a mirror, what flashes first? Critique, correction, doubt, an internal scan for what's wrong, what's still broken, what's not quite ready. That isn't self-awareness. That's fear-based perception. You're not seeing the real you. You're seeing the ghost of a version you hoped you'd grown out of. And worse, you're measuring your current self against a set of judgments designed to keep you in emotional debt. Why does this happen? Because the echo trained you to measure identity visually, not energetically. You learn to gauge who you are by how acceptable, likable, beautiful, calm, successful, or controlled you appear. But your actual self is not visible in reflection. It's felt, it's lived, it's expressed. And mirrors don't capture energy. They only reflect structure. So when you look at yourself, especially during growth, the echo hijacks the moment and reminds you of every flaw it needs you to still believe in, to survive. Let's talk about what the mirror reflects when it's still under the echo's influence. It reflects your wounds, not your worth. It reflects past criticism, not current clarity. It reflects conditioning, not conviction. It reflects judgments made in fear, not insight grounded in truth. And so, the more you try to see yourself, the more distorted you become, because you're using a tool built to reflect structure, symmetry, posture, 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 when what's asking to be seen has no form. Here's the shift. You don't get to see who you are. You have to feel it first. Live it consistently. and then let mirrors confirm what embodiment has already taught. But not before. You'll know the mirror lie is in play when you do the following. Seek mirrors for validation after growth moments. Look for evidence of change in your body instead of your behavior. Diminish your power because the outer reflection hasn't caught up to your inner transformation. This is the echo's way of pulling you back into the visual world of proof and performance, where alignment must be seen before it can be trusted. But real self-knowing, it begins invisibly. It lives in choices, in how you respond when no one is watching, in how deeply you trust your own perception without needing reflection. So how do you dismantle the mirror lie? Step 1. Stop seeking confirmation. Mirrors can only reflect what you expect to see. Interrupt the loop. Don't ask, do I look like I've changed? Ask, am I living as someone who's changed? Step 2. Use energy as your metric. How grounded do you feel? How honest was your last yes? How still is your body when you're speaking truth? Those are the mirrors that matter. Step 3. Look inward before you look outward. Every time you catch your reflection, pause, close your eyes, feel who you are becoming. Let your body tell the story, then open your eyes, and let that energy inform your gaze. Step 4. Speak identity out loud. The mirror reflects what's silent, but your voice disrupts the pattern. Declare the truth you're integrating, not with vanity, with sovereignty. The mirror lie loses power when you no longer need mirrors to tell you who you are. Next, we move into a space where words fall away, where you stop narrating, optimizing, and even naming, and sit in silence. Not to listen for new information, but to see if you can simply hold space, without letting the echo rush in to fill it. You've seen the mirror for what it is, a visual trap dressed as self-awareness. And you've started replacing sight with sensing, perception with embodiment. But now we arrive at the most uncomfortable threshold. Not because it hurts, but because it's quiet, still, unstructured. And the echo hates that, because silence is dangerous to identities built on noise. So the test becomes simple. Can you sit in silence, without reaching for thoughts, strategies, identities, or narratives to fill it? Can you let being be enough, without layering it with meaning? This is the great filter. Many people can perform growth. They can talk the talk, show the proof, demonstrate the wins, but few can sit still, in the pause between versions, without trying to explain who they are becoming. Silence is the gap where the echo dies, or tries to resurrect itself, through mental chatter, planning, self-questioning, or memory loops. Because without a performance to narrate, what are you left with? You, only you, the unfiltered field of consciousness. And that, for the echo self, is pure threat. So let's name what shows up in silence. Unfinished stories, emotions you forgot you buried, thoughts that challenge your image, body sensations you've ignored for years, the subtle tension between who you are and who you pretend to be. In silence, your nervous system speaks. Not in language, but in compression, tension, tingling, release. And your task is not to fix it. Your task is to stay. Here's how the echo tries to sabotage silence. It floods you with thoughts. You should be doing something. You're wasting time. What if this means you're lazy? It activates self-improvement mode. This would be a good time to visualize. Maybe journal something deep right now. Turn this stillness into strategy. It resurrects identity stories. Who am I without doing? What happens if no one sees this version of me? This is not failure. This is detox. The silence is working. So here's the challenge. Don't just experience stillness. Hold it. Expand it. Watch what rises. Refuse to react. Let it pass. And in that gap, you'll find something sacred. The self beyond narrative, the identity beyond improvement, the you that isn't echoing anyone, not your parents, not society, not your past, not your aspirations, just presence. Now let's be practical. Here's how to build this capacity. Start with short moments. No music, no journaling, no breath work. Just sit. 3 minutes. Eyes open or closed. Let the echo panic. And wait for the real you to arrive. Watch for the moment you want to escape. That moment is the edge. Hold. Stay. You're rewiring your nervous system to accept stillness as safety. Don't interpret what shows up. Don't label thoughts good or bad. Don't fix feelings. Witness without storytelling. That's where the transformation anchors. Because when you can hold silence, without grasping for noise, identity, or movement, you've passed the deepest test. Not because you achieved stillness, but because you allowed it. Next, now that you've cleared space, we'll begin the process of structured unlayering. It's time to detox not just behaviors, but every pattern the echo embedded in your identity. You're ready for the protocol. You've now proven that you can hold silence. You've witnessed the panic, the echoes, the old narratives fighting for space. And you didn't flinch. That means you're finally ready to not just observe the echo self, but to dismantle it methodically. Welcome to the Identity Detox Protocol, a practical, structured unlayering of the false self, so the real one can finally breathe. First, why a protocol? Because the echo self doesn't respond to inspiration. It doesn't shift because of insight. It doesn't dissolve because you had a powerful realization. It requires consistent contradiction, systematic rewiring, daily disruption of its survival logic. This protocol isn't about changing who you are. It's about subtracting who you never were. The detox protocol operates in 5 stages: recognition, exposure, interruption, replacement, reinforcement. Each one is essential. Each one interrupts a layer of false identity that's been running on autopilot. Let's walk through them. Stage 1, recognition. This is where most people stop. Recognition means becoming acutely aware of when your echo identity is in control. That means learning to spot language you use that isn't yours, body reactions rooted in outdated fear, emotional responses tied to a survival past, thought patterns that predict rejection or abandonment. Recognition is awareness without justification. You don't explain why you're doing it. You name it. You claim it. You say, "That's the echo, not me." And that clarity alone begins to sever the trance. Stage 2, exposure. Now that you've recognized the pattern, you bring it into the light. Echo identities thrive in secrecy. They operate best when they remain unspoken, unexamined, unchallenged. So you expose them verbally, in writing, or with someone you trust. You speak your pattern like a witness, not a victim. Examples: I realized I lower my tone every time I speak to someone in authority. I noticed I perform emotional neutrality, so I don't seem too much. I'm watching how I smile when I want to scream. Exposure removes shame. It interrupts hiding, and the echo shrinks under truth. Stage 3, interruption. Now we disrupt the pattern. Not mentally, behaviorally. This is where you do the opposite, where you contradict the echo's script on purpose. If your echo avoids visibility, you post something honest. If your echo stays agreeable, you speak your edge. If your echo flinches at silence, you stay still. If your echo clings to old routines, you break one without reason. This is where your nervous system resists, where everything feels off, uncomfortable, wrong. That's good. It means the interruption is working. Stage 4, replacement. Now that you've interrupted the behavior, you don't leave space empty. You replace it with alignment, with conscious identity. This isn't just doing something different. It's becoming someone different. Ask, what would a version of me with no echo do here? What does the real me want to say, feel, create, allow? And then act as them. Even if you shake. Even if it feels fake. Even if no one claps. Replacement is where your new self builds muscle. Not by imagining, by embodying. Stage 5, reinforcement. Here's where most regress. They interrupt once or twice, then retreat. But detox is only effective with repetition. That means reinforcing the aligned behavior until it becomes your new baseline. It's not about trying harder. It's about choosing consistently. Reinforcement means creating new habits that support the new identity. Surrounding yourself with people who mirror truth, not the echo. Protecting your environment from energy that triggers the old loops. Journaling victories, no matter how small. And most importantly, not waiting to feel ready to live as the new you. You don't wait for full embodiment to begin embodying. You reinforce it by doing it repeatedly. What happens when you commit to this protocol? The echo loses influence. The body begins to relax in authenticity. The mind slows its chatter. You stop second-guessing yourself. Your energy becomes magnetic instead of compensatory. Detox isn't dramatic. It's daily. And it leads to something your echo self has never let you feel: sustained peace. Next, we'll explore why letting go of the echo self, even when it's painful, comes with a surprising emotion: grief. You're going to miss the version of you that once kept you safe. Now that you've stepped into the detox protocol, you're starting to feel something strange. Not just relief, not just clarity, something heavier, quieter, unexpected. You miss your echo, even though it limited you, even though it delayed your growth, even though it was built on fear. It was familiar, predictable, comfortable in its own dysfunctional way. This is echo withdrawal, and it is a real psychological and energetic experience. Let's understand why it happens. Your echo self isn't just a set of behaviors. It's a psychological home, a container, a framework that made sense of your world. It helped you belong. It got you love, however conditional. It kept you from rejection, however fake the connection. It got you applause, however hollow. So now that you're leaving it behind, your system doesn't just feel lost. It grieves. Because your echo self was, in many ways, the version of you that helped you survive. And anytime we lose a survival mechanism, even if it's toxic, we feel like we're losing a part of ourselves. Here's what withdrawal can sound or feel like. I feel empty. Who am I now? I miss how easy it was to just go along. Everything feels too quiet, too still. I thought I'd feel more powerful by now. Why does this new version of me feel so boring? These aren't signs of regression. They're signs of integration. You are detoxing from identity addiction. Why does grief show up during expansion? Because every time you leave behind an old identity, you're not just releasing behavior, you're releasing the people, places, patterns, and praise that came with it. You're losing the roles you used to play, the way people saw you, the responsibilities you carried that made you feel needed. Even if they weren't real, they were yours, so of course you miss them. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. Here's what's important. Don't try to numb this grief. Don't rush to feel better. Don't spiritualize it away. Sit with it. Let the old self leave on its own terms. Honor it. Thank it. Say, you were never meant to be forever, but you got me here, and then release it again. Here are tools for navigating echo withdrawal. Create a ritual of closure. Write a letter to the echo self. Thank it for its role. Name the beliefs it held, and declare what you're no longer available for. Move your body differently. The echo lived in your posture, your breath, your walk. Change your movement, not to fake it, but to disrupt muscle memory. Allow the slowness. Withdrawal brings fatigue, sadness, disorientation. Let it be slow. There is no need to rush into a new version of you. Expect the echo to reappear once. It will try to return with one last tempting offer. Just be who you were, and this discomfort will go away. Expect it, decline it, and move forward anyway. This grief will not last forever, but it must be honored, because on the other side isn't just a better version of you. It's the real version of you, the one that's no longer pretending, no longer performing, no longer echoing. Next, we'll explore a more physiological dimension of resistance, why your very body might reject success, because it once equated expansion with danger. It's time to face your nervous system. You've grieved the echo. You've honored what it cost you and what it gave you, even as you let it go. But now a deeper resistance begins to surface. One that doesn't come from your thoughts, your habits, or even your language, comes from your body. Because your nervous system, the mechanism that governs safety, threat, and survival, still doesn't believe success is safe. And until that changes, it will sabotage progress faster than any belief system ever could. Let's get honest. Have you ever noticed yourself pulling back? Right as things start to go well, you land the opportunity. Then feel exhausted. You get closer to the dream. Then start doubting. You get the attention you once craved. Then panic. This isn't weakness. This isn't a lack of ambition. This isn't laziness. This is nervous system dysregulation. Your body has been trained, through years of echo reinforcement, to associate peace with emptiness, visibility with attack, success with loss, expansion with abandonment. So when things finally begin to align, your system doesn't celebrate. It warns you, and without realizing it, you retreat, you delay, you shrink, you self-sabotage, not because you don't want growth, but because your body still thinks it's a threat. Here's how the echo trained your nervous system. Early reinforcement. If your earliest memories of attention were tied to punishment, not praise. Your body codes visibility as dangerous. Emotional inconsistency. If love was unpredictable, success starts to feel like a risk. It could vanish at any moment. Achievement as currency. If you were only celebrated when performing, rest now feels like abandonment. All of this builds a somatic baseline, an invisible signal that says, comfort is chaos, safety is stagnation, growth is grief, and your system does what it's designed to do, keep you alive, even if that means keeping you stuck. Here's what nervous system rejection looks like. You get a breakthrough and immediately numb out. You overwork even after promising to slow down. You cancel big ideas for now. Again, you start drama in relationships that were finally feeling healthy. You create unnecessary tasks to avoid rest. Your mind says yes, but your body screams no, because your nervous system isn't aligned with the success you say you want. So how do you retrain the system? It begins by understanding this. Your body doesn't respond to thoughts. It responds to experience. So you must build a new internal relationship to safety. Not intellectually, physiologically. Let's walk through how. Step 1. Identify your current baseline. Ask, when do I feel most normal? Is it during stress, urgency, over-explaining, or being needed? If so, your baseline is chaos-coded. Awareness is power. You can't shift what you pretend is normal. Step 2. Start practicing microsafety. This doesn't mean long vacations or meditating all day. It means teaching your body to feel safe during small moments of stillness. Try this. Sit for 2 minutes and do nothing. Watch your system panic. Don't move. Don't soothe. Don't distract. Let it pass. That's the body releasing the old alert pattern. You're not doing nothing. You're rewiring. Step 3. Anchor success in sensation. Don't just celebrate milestones. Notice how your body feels when you're aligned. Say out loud, this is safe. This is mine. This does not mean loss. Speak safety into your system. Let your body hear truth over and over, until it starts to believe you. Step 4. Use breath as a recalibration tool. Every time you're triggered by success, slow your breath. Let your exhale be longer than your inhale. This tells your nervous system, we're not in danger. We're just expanding. Here's the truth. You don't rise by forcing the echo out of the mind. You rise by calming the body that still believes. You are not yet safe enough to grow. And once the body accepts expansion, the mind follows, the actions align, and the success sticks. Next, we confront something no one tells you. The real you? The one you've worked so hard to find? At first, it's going to feel boring, but not for long. You've just discovered how your nervous system might be rejecting success, not because you're broken, but because it was trained for chaos. Now, let's uncover another quiet shock that surfaces. As you finally begin to settle into the real you, it's underwhelming, still, plain, quiet. The real you at first feels boring. And that will scare you, because your echo self, it was dramatic, always processing, always fixing, always chasing. It gave you emotional spikes, kept you relevant in your mind, made you feel like you were in constant motion, which felt like evolution. But the real you doesn't perform, doesn't need chaos to feel alive, doesn't respond to every trigger, doesn't run toward every opportunity just because it's available. It breathes, pauses, chooses, and compared to the echo's noisy life, that feels empty. Why does this happen? Because your baseline for meaningful was tied to struggle. If it didn't hurt, it wasn't growth. If it wasn't urgent, it wasn't valuable. If it didn't stretch you to the edge, it didn't count. So now, when things feel simple, aligned, easeful, your system doesn't register it as success. It registers it as apathy. But it's not. It's clarity. You're just not used to peace yet. Here's what the early days of the real you look like. Fewer emotional spikes. No need to constantly explain yourself. Less drama in relationships. More space between stimulus and response. Simpler decisions. Quiet wins. And if you're not ready, you'll mislabel this as regression. You'll think, I'm disconnected. I'm not feeling anything. I've lost my edge. But this isn't regression. It's regulation. Your nervous system is finally out of the fight or flight echo loop. And now you're just sitting in life, without panic, without spin. Here's how to stay with this unfamiliar boredom. Name it accurately. It's not boring. It's regulated. Say, this stillness is the proof of my growth. Resist the urge to stir things up. Don't chase new problems to feel in motion. Let the stillness become your new normal. Redirect your creativity. Channel energy into building, not fixing. You don't need to solve drama anymore. Use that power to create instead. Trust time. Boredom fades. As regulation becomes familiar, you'll start accessing deeper inspiration, truer connections, more potent clarity. But first, you must stay through the stillness. This stage is where most people sabotage their transformation. They go back to chaos, not because they loved it, but because it made them feel something. But you're staying, because you're finally learning that the real you doesn't need to impress, prove, or chase. It just needs space. Next, it's time to fill that space intentionally, to start designing the identity that's actually meant to succeed, with structure, with power, and without echoes. You've stepped away from chaos. You've survived the quiet. You've faced the discomfort of not being in performance. And you're still here. That means you're ready, not just to let go of the echo, but to consciously construct the identity that was always meant to succeed. This is the beginning of alignment by design, not default, because identity isn't something you find, it's something you form, and now we build. But first, let's clear a myth. The identity meant to succeed is not a role, not a brand, not a curated collection of positive traits. It is not the version of you that impresses the most people. It is not the image that wins the most applause. It is the truest, most internally consistent, least negotiated version of your self-expression that also happens to be sustainable. That's what we build now. Let's begin with a foundational principle. Identity follows intention, not history, not mood, not environment. So we start by setting the direction. Ask, if I stop trying to prove, earn, or be liked, who would I build myself into? Then go further. How does that version speak? What does that version say no to without guilt? What systems support that version's momentum? What kind of environments nourish, not drain, them? You don't have to feel ready to become that version. You just have to start acting in accordance with them. Now, we move into structure. Here are the 4 pillars to build your new identity on: clarity of voice, non-negotiables, habitual congruence, environmental alignment. Let's walk through each. Clarity of voice. Your new identity must sound like something. That means no more vague dreams, no more soft language, no more outsourced truths. Start writing and speaking from a defined tone. What does this version of you no longer tolerate? What does this version express with confidence? What values are lived, not just stated? If you cannot articulate the new self, you will default back to the echo. So name your values, define your tone, choose your language on purpose. Non-negotiables. Success isn't about willpower. It's about boundaries that protect your alignment. Decide, what will this identity never do again? What rhythms must be preserved to stay regulated? What behaviors signal, I'm slipping into the echo again? Non-negotiables don't make you rigid. They make you reliable to yourself. List 5 behaviors, routines, or boundaries that you will hold sacred no matter what. They become the scaffolding of your new identity. Habitual congruence. You are what you repeat, not what you intend, not what you declare. So now we build habits that express this identity daily. Ask, what does the morning of this version look like? How does this version handle discomfort or silence? What does this version do when no one's watching? Track it, refine it, live it. Small choices, done consistently, will solidify the self far faster than any breakthrough ever could. Environmental alignment. Even the most powerful identity will weaken. In environments built for the echo, look around. Does your space reflect who you're becoming? Do your digital inputs reinforce your values? Do your social circles mirror your integrity or your old survival roles? Upgrade everything, not out of ego, out of alignment. Your environment should not seduce you back into the echo. It should amplify your clarity. Now be warned, as you build this version of yourself, resistance will arise, not just from within, but from the world around you. Because when you change, you threaten every relationship that depended on you staying the same. Next, we prepare for that backlash. Because the moment you start succeeding as you, someone will try to hand you your old self. You've taken the leap. You're building a new identity that finally aligns with your truth. And the world is reacting. Your environment's pushing back. Some voices are louder now. Some relationships feel different, maybe even strained. But here's something deeper, more subtle, more difficult to name. It's not just that people resist your growth. It's that they try to reassign you to the version of yourself you've outgrown. This is what we call a social echo. It's not inside you, it's around you. And if you're not careful, you'll let someone else's memory of you override your present truth. Social echoes operate like this. You walk into a room. Your energy is different. Your clarity is stronger. You've let go of past coping mechanisms. You're no longer shrinking, smiling, or proving. But then someone, often unconsciously, hands you the script. You've always been the funny one. You're the peacemaker. You're not really like that. You used to be so chill. You've changed. And in that moment, you feel the pull, not to explain, not to defend, but to comply, to go back, to soften the new edge, to laugh even when it's not funny, to soothe when you're the one who needs holding, to become familiar because it's easier than being misunderstood. This is social echo pressure, and it is one of the most powerful forces trying to keep you small. Let's break down how it works. 1. Emotional contracts. Most relationships are built not just on connection, but on unspoken agreements. I'll play this role, and you'll play that one. When you break the contract by changing, people feel betrayed, even if they don't say it. 2. Nostalgic identity. Some people fell in love with your wounds. They related to your self-doubt. They needed your mess to feel less alone in theirs. So when you clean up emotionally, they feel abandoned. 3. Relevance reflex. If you've always needed them, and now you don't, They may unconsciously trigger old insecurities to pull you back. Not out of malice, out of fear, because your growth has left them unsure of their place. And now here's the trap. If you're not grounded in your new identity, you'll slowly start to edit yourself again. Not because you want to regress, but because part of you still wants connection, still wants approval, still wants peace. But here's the paradox. You can't create real peace by performing. You can only create peace through congruence, even if that costs you comfort. So how do you resist social echoes? 1. Catch the script early. As soon as someone speaks to the old version of you, pause. Ask, are they talking to the real me or to who I used to be? That awareness alone breaks the trance. 2. Don't explain. Embody. You don't need to say, I've changed. Just be the new you. Consistently. The ones meant to walk with you will adjust. The rest will drift. 3. Practice microtruths. Correct people gently, clearly, and immediately. Example, you always let stuff go. You respond, I used to. I don't anymore. Not to challenge, but to assert. 4. Create buffer space. Limit time in environments that only validate your past. Give yourself space to reinforce the new identity, until it's strong enough to withstand old mirrors. Here's something most won't tell you. Part of the social echo is inside you. It's not just others. It's the version of you that still wants to be liked, still wants to be easy, still wants to be invited. And that version must be gently but firmly told. We don't betray truth for love anymore. Because the real you doesn't need to be remembered. They need to be met. And that meeting requires space, clarity, repetition. Next, we explore what happens when you commit so fully to the new you, that the old one becomes unrecognizable, even to people who once knew you best. That unrecognizability is not isolation, it's power. You've broken the social echo. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've held the line when others tried to hand you your old role. Now comes something unexpected. You walk into spaces, and you no longer feel familiar. To them, to the past, even at times to yourself. You're unrecognizable. And that, right now, is your power. Let's define it clearly. Unrecognizability isn't about ego. It's not performance. It's not rebellion. It's the natural result of choosing alignment. So consistently, that the image people once had of you no longer fits. It's the moment your essence outgrows your old container. And at first, it's lonely. You'll see people hesitate. You'll hear, you've changed. You're different. I don't know how to read you anymore. Take that as a compliment. Because what they're really saying is, I can't categorize you anymore. And once you're free of their categories, you're free to create anything. Here's what changes when you become unrecognizable. Old scripts stop working. People can't guilt you, manipulate you, push the same buttons because those buttons are gone. New relationships form on truth. You're no longer attracting people who vibe with your pain. You're attracting those who resonate with your clarity. You stop auditioning. You no longer need to convince anyone you've grown. You let your presence speak for itself. You see through others more clearly. The more real you become, the more falsehood becomes obvious in others. Not with judgment, but with peace. But here's the cost. You will outgrow the room. Often, you'll notice certain conversations no longer stimulate you. Certain dynamics no longer feel safe. Certain behaviors feel like a costume you can't put on anymore. And you may miss the days when you fit in, when you were easy to read, when you knew the rules of the performance. But you've chosen liberation, and freedom isn't always familiar. First. So how do you stabilize in unrecognizability? 1. Define yourself privately. Don't wait for others to get it. Sit with yourself. Journal, reflect, and anchor in who you are now without external reference. 2. Let silence protect your evolution. You don't owe the world an explanation for your expansion. Let your absence from old versions speak louder than your defense ever could. 3. Find your frequency match. Seek out communities and individuals who don't need you to perform. They exist, but they can only recognize you once you stop pretending. Don't rush the rewrite. You don't need to immediately fill in the blanks of your new identity. Live it. Experience it. Let it emerge slowly and steadily. This chapter is your turning point, because when you accept unrecognizability, you stop reaching backward. You stop trying to bring people with you who don't want to come. You stop apologizing for evolving. And from this moment forward, you begin to build a life that only the real you can sustain. Next, we'll unpack why even some of your biggest dreams, the ones you fought for, may no longer fit who you are becoming, and why it's okay to let them go. You've become unrecognizable, not because you're trying to shock the world, but because you're finally becoming real. The masks are gone. The echo's quiet. The old dynamics can no longer hold your energy. And now something even more surprising happens. You start to outgrow your own dreams. Yes, those goals you once fought tooth and nail to reach. The visions you thought defined your worth. The outcomes that once felt like salvation. They begin to feel small, not because they weren't meaningful, but because they were built by the self you no longer are. Let's break this down. When you were operating as the echo version of yourself, your dreams were filtered through fear, through survival, through approval-seeking, through wounded ambition. So what you pursued, even if it looked powerful, was often rooted in compensation. You weren't chasing what you truly wanted. You were chasing what you thought would prove your value. And now, standing in your real self, you realize that old dream, it was an escape plan, not a blueprint. Here's how you'll know a dream is expiring. You get closer to it and feel nothing. The enthusiasm is gone, and you're not sure why. You start to question why you even wanted it. You can't trace the desire back to truth, only to fear or ego. You feel strangely relieved at the idea of letting it go. You expect grief, but you feel peace. Your new self can't imagine living that version of life. Feels like watching someone else's movie. Letting go of a dream doesn't mean you failed. It means you're updating your inner architecture. It means your nervous system is no longer bracing for proof. It means your emotional compass now points to joy, not validation. But make no mistake, releasing a dream, even an outdated one, is an emotional process, because that dream carried hope. It gave you direction when you were lost. It gave your echo self a purpose. And now it's complete. So how do you release a dream with grace? 1. Honor its purpose. Say, this dream carried me. It served a version of me I now release with love. 2. Don't replace it immediately. Let there be space. Don't rush to swap in a shinier goal just to avoid the discomfort of emptiness. 3. Journal the contrast. Write a letter from your current self to the old dream. Describe how you've changed. Describe what you need now. 4. Redirect your momentum. Just because the target changed doesn't mean the energy is lost. You're still in motion, but now your direction is different. Letting go is a sign of alignment, not apathy. And the more in tune you are with who you're becoming, the more often you'll refine your vision. Not because you're lost, but because you're finally listening. Next, we'll talk about what happens when you arrive, when everything clicks, when the struggle ends, and why it feels nothing like you thought it would. You've released the outdated dream. You've chosen truth over nostalgia. And now you're here, in alignment, in peace, in clarity. You've arrived. So where's the explosion? The fireworks? The emotional climax? The scene where everything finally makes sense? It doesn't come. Not because you missed something, but because arrival doesn't feel like a movie. It feels subtle, quiet, anticlimactic, and that can be confusing. You spent years chasing breakthrough. You imagined that when you finally became the real you, you'd feel euphoric, validated, transformed, but instead, you feel still, present, unemotional, stable. That's because becoming who you were meant to be isn't an event. It's a remembrance. You're not stepping into something new. You're finally returning to something ancient, something always known, just buried beneath the echo. Here's the paradox. The more aligned you become, the less dramatic it feels, because drama lives in conflict. And now, you're no longer fighting yourself. You're no longer in contradiction. You're no longer needing constant validation. You're no longer outsourcing your peace. So you're left with something that feels underwhelming, only because you've been conditioned to equate chaos with aliveness. Arrival looks like waking up without emotional noise, speaking your truth without a spike in adrenaline, creating without overthinking, being in relationships that don't drain or perform, moving through your day without narrating it to yourself. It's not numb. It's neutral. It's not dull. It's direct. It's not intense. It's integrated. And that quietness, that absence of friction, that's the real prize. So how do you stay in this anticlimactic arrival without sabotaging it? 1. Redefine fulfillment. Let go of the idea that arrival must feel explosive. Say, this stillness is the arrival I once prayed for. 2. Resist the pull to stir things up. When things feel too easy, your echo might tempt you to start unnecessary fires. Don't. 3. Let presence be the reward. You're no longer chasing relief. You're living inside it. Let that be enough. 4. Stop narrating. Start experiencing. You don't need to make sense of every moment. You don't need to explain your peace. Just live it. Here's the truth no one talks about. Real transformation doesn't feel like fireworks. Feels like nothing's wrong. And for someone who lived in echo for years, that's everything. Next, we explore what it means to finally stop performing. To no longer prove, explain, or dramatize your being. And to stay exactly where you are, without needing to earn your right to be there. You've arrived in the most unfamiliar space of all. Peace. Not the peace that comes from absence of conflict, but the deeper kind, the one that asks for no apology, no explanation, no justification. You're here. You're whole. You're no longer performing to earn your place in the world. But that doesn't mean the impulse to perform disappears overnight. Because for most of your life, you've believed that your value had to be proven, validated, earned, demonstrated. And now you're being asked to just be, to stay, to take up space, without performing for it. This is one of the hardest shifts you'll ever make, because performance was your protection. It gave you a role, a rhythm, a reason to belong. But here's what you're starting to learn. Performance isn't the same as presence, and it never leads to peace. So what does it look like to stay without performing? Let's break it down. First, recognize your performance patterns. Performance doesn't always look like a show. Sometimes it looks like over-explaining why you deserve rest, proving your kindness so you're not rejected, overachieving to silence the imposter feeling, smiling when you're actually angry, shrinking so others feel more comfortable, being the strong one because you don't know how to be held. All of this is performance, not because it's fake, but because it's done to manage perception. You're not expressing, you're calibrating, for approval, for safety, for control. Now that you've arrived in peace, these patterns don't belong, and they'll start to feel louder than ever. Second, redefine what it means to be enough. You used to tie worth to outcome, to work, to how many people understood you. But now you're building a reality where worth is unshakable, where existence equals enough, where presence is power. That starts by detaching value from output. Ask yourself, can I rest without justifying it? Can I hold a boundary without guilt? Can I share my truth without overpackaging it? Can I be quiet in a room and still feel valid? These are the new metrics of alignment. Third, embrace low-stimulation living. The performance-driven version of you thrived on adrenaline, urgency, reaction, high-stakes dynamics. It kept you on. kept you sharp, kept you scanning. But peace isn't performance. It's groundedness. And groundedness often feels slow, still, even boring. You'll be tempted to fill the space, to stir the pot, to create unnecessary movement. Resist it. Sit in the low stimulation frequency. Let your system learn that nothing is wrong, just because everything is calm. Fourth, catch the moment you start acting. You'll feel it, that micro moment where you shift posture, tone, or expression to make it land better for someone. That's the old performance code. Catch it. Pause. Ask, am I doing this to be honest? Or to be accepted? The difference will change everything. Fifth, let stillness be your strategy. You're used to force, to chase, to urgency. Now stillness becomes your center. You don't rush into reaction. You respond when it's right. You don't run after closure. You allow space to clarify truth. Stillness doesn't mean passivity. It means power without panic. This is what staying looks like. You say the thing without softening the edges. You hold the boundary without needing a 10-paragraph explanation. You rest without feeling like you need to post about self-care. You stop seeking applause because your presence is the reward. You are no longer a performer. You are a presence. And presence doesn't need a stage. Next, we meet the echo's final form, the last desperate grasp it makes. Before it vanishes completely, get ready for its last stand. You've learned to stay. You've stopped performing. You've dropped the masks and let stillness be enough. And now, when everything seems aligned, the echo makes one final move. Not loud, not violent, not obvious, but precise, emotional, personal. Presents you with the final identity test. A moment, opportunity, or person that reflects your old self back to you with unnerving familiarity. And for a brief moment, you'll feel pulled, invited, tempted to return, because this isn't chaos. It's comfort, wrapped in nostalgia, laced with safety, infused with something that feels like love. But it's not. It's the echo, making its last offer. This final test isn't about survival. It's about loyalty. You've become strong enough to move forward. But will you? Or will you stay loyal to the last piece of who you used to be? Here's what this final test might look like. A past relationship reappears when you feel most peaceful. An old job offers you more money, but costs you your boundaries. An opportunity asks you to shrink, just this once. A friend starts treating you like the old version of you, and it feels strangely soothing. A trigger returns, and instead of reacting, you almost do. Because it's familiar. None of these are failures. They are invitations. The echo is testing your alignment, not to ruin you, but to make sure you're ready to live without it. So how do you pass the test? 1. Pause the moment you feel nostalgia. Nostalgia isn't always truth. Often it's a filtered memory, a glorified version of dysfunction, a highlight reel of the echo's better days. Catch it, interrupt it, say to yourself, I don't miss the whole. I miss the part one romanticized. 2. Speak your now out loud. The echo wants you to forget how far you've come. So speak it, journal it, say it out loud. This version of me is real. That version was a role. 3. Create a separation ritual. If the echo shows up in the form of a person, place, or behavior, mark the final decision with a boundary you can feel. Write a letter you don't send. Decline the offer with finality. Remove the old contacts. Archive the old version. It's not about cruelty. It's about clarity. 4. Let peace be your proof. The final test often feels right, only because it used to be all you knew. But peace has no tension, no proving, no cost to your integrity. If you feel tension, it's not aligned, no matter how good it looks. This is the echo's last stand. It knows it can't survive clarity, so it wraps itself in beauty. It looks like closure. It sounds like an opportunity. It smells like validation. But it's the final loop. Your job now? See it, name it, let it pass. and walk forward without looking back. Next, we build something new, not as a correction, not as a replacement, but from a place the echo never touched. Pure, clear authorship. You faced the final test. You recognized the echo's last disguise. You didn't flinch. You didn't explain. You didn't go back. And now, you're standing on ground that isn't recycled, isn't reactive, isn't written by survival, validation, or inherited beliefs. This ground is blank. And in front of you is something few people ever truly face. A life with no script, no audience to please, no character to perform, no old narrative to continue. Just authorship. Just now. Just truth. Let's be honest. This is terrifying. Because even painful scripts gave you structure. Even outdated roles gave you certainty. Even misaligned dreams gave you direction. And now you have to write something new. From a place you've never lived before. Here's what most people do when they reach this place. They unconsciously write a sequel to a story they already ended. They create slightly improved versions of the same life they just outgrew. Why? Because the unknown feels dangerous, even when it's full of truth. But that's not your path. You didn't come this far to upgrade your cage. You came here to write from the clean slate of clarity. So how do you begin? 1. Accept that new won't feel natural at first. Don't confuse discomfort with misalignment. The identity you're meant to build will feel awkward at first because it's unfamiliar. Let that awkwardness affirm you. Say, this isn't off. It's just unpracticed. 2. Stop referencing old maps. The old you used to ask, what worked before? What did they applaud? What's the safe path? But new identity doesn't follow precedent. It follows principle. So instead, ask, what's aligned, even if it's unfamiliar? What's true, even if it's hard to explain? What feels rooted, even if no one claps? Burn the old maps. Don't decorate the cage. Design a new terrain. 3. Write through behavior, not branding. You don't need a slogan. You need a structure. Stop obsessing over how your new identity looks. Start focusing on how it lives. Ask, what do my mornings look like now? What rhythms protect my peace? What kind of rest recharges me most? What environments amplify this identity's power? That's your script now. It's not poetic, but it's real, and it works. 4. Replace drama with direction. The echo lived in loops of emotional reaction. But now you lead with direction. You choose your energy, your presence, your voice, your pace. You don't need a plot twist to feel alive. You don't need a breakdown to feel reborn. You just need clarity, routine, and alignment. 5. Trust the you no one has met yet. You've met the echo. The world has too. But this new you, this author, this aligned builder, they're just getting started. You won't always have evidence. You won't always have support. You won't always have a guide. And that's the point. You are becoming someone that your past cannot instruct, that your environment cannot reflect, that your memories cannot validate. This version writes the rules. This version doesn't play the game. So start today. Make one decision. From pure alignment. No performance. No fear. No legacy. Just truth. Then do it again tomorrow. And again. Because the only way to write from a place you've never been is to trust that your presence is enough. To build what no echo ever could. Next, we stop relying on temporary highs. And we build the systems that make your transformation stick. For real and for good. You've burned the scripts. You're building a life from presence. You're no longer looking back. And you've stopped needing a past reference to justify your future. But now comes the deeper challenge. How do you sustain it? How do you hold onto the shift? When the high wears off. When life gets boring again. When the echo whispers in quieter, subtler ways. Because momentum will get you started. But only mastery will keep you aligned. And that's what we build now. Let's start with this truth. Transformation isn't a moment. It's a maintenance. You don't just arrive in alignment. You tend it. You protect it. You reinforce it again and again. And the second you treat it like a destination, you risk slipping back into passivity. Here's what mastery requires. 1. Rituals motivation. Forget hype. Forget adrenaline. Forget the emotional charge that comes from new. Ask, what are my non-negotiable daily actions that express who I really am? Do them when you feel like it. Do them when you don't. Do them until they are you. 2. Audit your inputs. Momentum is loud, tolerates noise. Mastery is quiet. It requires curation. So ask, who am I listening to regularly? Do their words align with my truth? What media, people, habits reinforce the identity I'm keeping? This isn't about control. It's about protection. 3. Expect emotional boredom. Growth doesn't always feel exciting. And that's not a problem. It's a sign of integration. When the big aha moments fade, you're left with rhythm, practice, repetition, and that's the goal. Because the real self doesn't need adrenaline to feel valid. It just lives. 4. Create identity checkpoints. You don't need to wait until things fall apart to realize you've drifted. So set checkpoints every month. Ask yourself, am I still aligned with what I've built? Have I allowed anything or anyone to reintroduce echo traits? What am I tolerating that doesn't belong here? What am I avoiding that this identity must face? Don't wait for chaos to course correct. Use clarity as your compass. 5. Anchor through embodiment. You don't stay aligned by thinking. You stay aligned by being. So bring it into your body, your posture, your tone, your pace, your breath, your sleep, your food. Let the way you live reinforce the way you exist. Mastery isn't intellectual. It's physical. It's behavioral. It's moment-by-moment integrity, expressed through action. And when it all feels too quiet, when the world seems loud, urgent, and frantic, and you wonder if you've gone too slow or missed something by choosing peace, come back to this. Momentum is for the masses. Mastery is for the aligned. You didn't come here to impress. You came here to embody. And nothing sticks like identity built through quiet practice. Next, we release the final myth that you must go back and fix everything in your past to be worthy of the future you're creating now. You don't, and we'll show you why. You've built new rituals. You've chosen mastery over momentum. You've learned to stay still without apology. And now, one final thread tugs at your attention. What about everything I left behind? What about the damage? What about the things I didn't heal? What if I missed something? This is where so many begin to spiral. Because once you've awakened, it's easy to look back at your past and feel overwhelmed. The missteps, the relationships, the roles you played, the time you lost, the things you said yes to before you knew how to say no. And you start to believe this lie that you can't fully live forward until you go back and fix everything. But here's the truth. You don't need to clean every corner of your history to walk boldly into your future. Healing isn't about repair. It's about release. Not every wound needs to be reopened. Not every scar needs to be explained. Not every memory needs to be dissected. And sometimes, in your effort to understand it all, you re-entangle yourself in the very patterns you've already outgrown. This is not denial. It's discernment. You must learn to differentiate between what's unresolved versus what's just unused. Not every emotion left behind is a wound. Some are simply no longer relevant. Let's break the compulsion to go back. 1. Emotional excavation is not always healing. Too many believe that transformation requires complete recall. But you were never meant to understand every trauma. Before you move, your nervous system doesn't need a thesis. It needs safety. It needs truth. It needs now. 2. Your alignment is the repair. You walking in integrity today heals more than years of analytical reflection ever could. Because alignment sends a message to your system. The threat is gone. The war is over. We don't live there anymore. You don't have to keep reading the battlefield map to trust the peace. 3. You're not responsible for others' closure. You may feel guilt. You may want to explain your transformation to people from your past. But here's the boundary. You're allowed to evolve without a permission slip. You're allowed to change without a press release. You're allowed to protect your peace without offering explanation. You are not a character in their healing story. You are the author of your own. 4. Most unfinished stories are illusions. The mind loves loops. It loves cycles. It will present you with old scenarios and convince you there's still more to unpack. But ask yourself, if I never return to this, would I still grow? If this was complete in me, even if others don't understand, can I live forward? Often the answer is yes. 5. Forward momentum is the final forgiveness. The most profound apology you can give to your past self is to stop dragging them into every present moment. You are not here to constantly explain why you didn't know better. You're here to embody the version that does. And in doing that, you redeem everything without having to fix anything. You don't need to reopen the pages. You just need to write better ones. From truth, from peace, from alignment. Let this be your closure. Your freedom today is your healing. Your presence now is your permission. Next, we stop asking whether the old self belongs in the future, and we begin building a future that would automatically reject the version of you that used to settle for crumbs. Let's create the next level so clearly that anything less becomes impossible. Now that you've released the need to fix everything, now that you've let the past be complete, it's time to do something few ever consider. Build a future so true, so aligned, so elevated, that your old self couldn't survive there. Not because it's harsh, but because it's healthy. And health will always reject what was born in dysfunction. Let's be precise. You're not trying to escape your past. You're designing a life that's incompatible with the habits, patterns, and self-perceptions that once defined you. This future becomes a filter. It naturally repels guilt-based decisions, shame-driven behavior, identity loops, echo traits, emotional survival tactics. And that's how you make the shift permanent, not through force, but through design. So how do you begin? 1. Design through contradiction. Ask, what in my future would feel unbearable to the old me? Not painful, just too honest, too exposed, too boundaried. Then build it. Examples: a relationship where honesty is non-negotiable. A career where your voice must be heard daily. A financial reality where your earning is tied to alignment. A body that requires rest, nourishment, and gentleness. These are not just upgrades. They are safeguards, because they require the real you to stay in the room. 2. Build friction into your future. Create systems that feel like friction to the old self. Example: daily reflection practices that the echo would avoid. Environments where emotional honesty is required. Relationships that notice when you shrink and won't let you. This friction trains you, clarifies who's operating, the aligned self or the echo. 3. Rejection becomes your measurement tool. If old patterns, old people, or old identities can easily enter your future life, it's not future enough. You must build spaces that feel inhospitable to misalignment, where performance dies, where lies wither, where authenticity breathes freely. Design your future like an ecosystem, one where the echo can't breathe. Only truth can survive. 4. Calibrate your standards upward. What you used to tolerate, you now outgrow. What used to feel generous now feels draining. And that's good. That's data. Every time something feels too small, you've identified your new edge. Now move it forward. Upgrade the system. Tighten the filter. Make access to your energy earned through resonance. 5. Let consistency replace effort. You don't need to try harder to stay aligned. You just need to build a life where misalignment doesn't fit. Consistency isn't about discipline. It's about design. Design a schedule, a rhythm, a relationship dynamic that forces you to stay true, not as a punishment, as a guarantee. Your future isn't a wish. It's a system built to honor your alignment and reject anything that doesn't. This is the reality you've been waiting for, not one where you manage your old self, but one where your old self can't survive. Because now, you've created a future, so honest, so congruent, so refined, that only the most authentic version of you can breathe in it. Next, we expand beyond the personal and step into reflection, where your very presence becomes a mirror that invites others to meet themselves too. You've created a future that your former self couldn't access. Your patterns no longer fit inside your environment. Your past has been honored, not relived. Your alignment is consistent, not just a moment but a movement. Now something powerful begins to happen, and it doesn't come from trying. Your presence starts to do something you didn't expect. It reflects, without preaching, without teaching, without converting. People begin to feel themselves differently around you, not because you're showing them how to change, but because your alignment reveals what's possible. You've become a mirror, not of who they are, but of who they could be. Here's the truth. Most people aren't changed by advice. They're changed by exposure. When they meet someone who is fully living in truth, someone who no longer seeks validation, who isn't playing a role, who moves through life without performing, something shifts. It's not about admiration. It's about recognition. Your alignment awakens theirs. But here's the nuance. Being a mirror is not a role. You don't force it. You don't curate it. You become it through authenticity. And it's felt, not explained. Let's explore how this works. 1. Your peace becomes disruptive. When you stop needing approval, people around you start to feel their own dependency. When you stop oversharing for connection, people begin to notice how much they've used words to earn attention. Your peace will trigger those still addicted to performance. Not because you're wrong, but because they're remembering what they've forgotten. This is not your burden to fix. It's your truth to hold. 2. Your boundaries create discomfort for a reason. When you stop rescuing, over-explaining, or softening your no, you stop colluding with others' avoidance. Some may get defensive. Some may call you cold. Some may say you've changed. You have, because you're no longer available for anything. That costs your truth. And the more clearly you live in that energy, the more clearly others see where they're not. That discomfort, that's their awakening if they choose to meet it. 3. You'll start to lose people and gain real ones. Being a mirror creates a filter. Those who can't meet their truth will distance themselves from yours. Let them. That is the gift. You're not responsible for holding space for those still married to their echo, but you'll also start attracting people who are ready. People who don't just want proximity to truth. They want to live in it. Now, your connections aren't based on performance or wounds. They're based on resonance, respect, reality. 4. You begin to teach without trying. You don't need credentials. You don't need scripts. You don't need permission. Your behavior is the transmission. The way you speak truthfully. The way you rest without guilt. The way you move slowly in urgency. The way you hold yourself when misunderstood. This is your curriculum. This is your leadership. People will watch you, not for inspiration, but for permission. You're not giving them instructions. You're giving them proof. 5. You will never know who you're affecting, and that's the point. You may never see the full impact, but every time you stay in alignment, someone watching you learns it's possible. Even if they don't tell you, even if they resist you, even if they criticize you, their system feels your congruence. Their soul notices the frequency. Their echo flares in the presence of authenticity. That is the mirror at work. Here's your role now. Keep being you. Radically, quietly, unapologetically. Don't distort your light to make others comfortable in their shadow. Don't shrink your truth to soothe someone else's echo. Live so aligned that no one has to ask what you believe. They see it, they feel it, and it invites them inward. Next, we ask the most radical question of all. Now that you've become so fully yourself, can you live without identity altogether? Let's go deeper than form, into freedom. You've built a new self. You've shaped new boundaries. You've aligned your behavior, words, and values. You've replaced the echo with essence. You've become a mirror for others. You've stabilized in authenticity. Now comes the final unraveling. The place beyond roles, beyond personas, even beyond identity itself. Because identity, for all its usefulness, is still a structure, still a concept, still a container. And the final freedom isn't about building a better self. It's about releasing the need for any self-definition at all. That's hard to grasp, because we've been taught to chase identity as the goal. I am this. I am not that. I am becoming someone. But what happens when you no longer need a definition to feel whole? Let's break this illusion. 1. Identity is always a map, not the territory. At its best, identity is a tool. It helps organize behavior. It helps clarify intention. It helps create coherence. But it's not the essence of you. It's not your core. It's not the soul underneath the structure. When you confuse the map for the ground, you get attached to labels, even the empowering ones. I'm a healer. I'm a coach. I'm a warrior. I'm a creator. Useful? Sure. Essential? No. You are not your label. You are the awareness that holds all possibility. 2. You outgrow even your aligned identity. Just like you outgrew your echo self, you'll one day outgrow the new you too. Because growth doesn't stop at clarity. It flows into fluidity. The self you define today will become a container tomorrow. And eventually, even the aligned identity becomes too narrow for your spirit. This is not regression. It's expansion. 3. The need to be someone fades. Early on, identity was your rescue. You needed to know who you were, so you could stop being who you weren't. But now, you don't need to cling to who to know your worth. You don't need to constantly define your role, to validate your right to exist. You begin to live in presence, not persona. You become impossible to label, not because you're chaotic, but because you're free. 4. You begin to move as awareness. This is subtle. You stop thinking in terms of roles. You start sensing in terms of resonance. You enter spaces not as a someone, but as presence. You no longer ask, how should I act in this context? You simply feel, what is most true here? That shift from performing identity to expressing awareness is liberation. 5. You lose the fear of being misunderstood. Because when you no longer rely on identity, you stop needing others to get you. You're not fragile. You're not defensive. You don't panic when someone mislabels you. You just return to stillness, return to truth, return to presence. That's your home now. You've walked through the fire. You've peeled away the echo. You've built alignment. You've become a mirror. And now, you are the space beneath all of it. The field, the witness, the unnameable. This is what it means to live without needing an identity. Not because you're lost, but because you're finally found in something deeper than definition. Next, we show you how to live from this state daily by tuning into the signal of your future self, the frequency that never lies. You've moved past identity, not by force, but through truth. You've stopped performing, stopped defining, stopped reacting. Now you're attuned to something deeper, the frequency of the future version of you, the version who doesn't need to believe anymore, because they already know. That version already exists, not metaphorically, energetically, vibrationally, and your next step is to learn how to tune into that signal so clearly, so consistently, that you stop chasing transformation and start living it. Let's begin with one truth. Every version of you emits a frequency. Your echo self had one. It sounded like guilt, like shame, like urgency, like confusion. It was low, repetitive, heavy. It didn't matter what words you used. The frequency always told the truth. Now, the future you, they have a different resonance. One you can feel. And once you learn how to locate that signal, you can align with it moment by moment. 1. Stop thinking. Start tuning. Frequency is not a thought. It's a sensation, a tone, an energetic blueprint. So the question isn't, what would future me do right now? It's, what would future me feel like right now? How do they move? How do they respond to interruptions? How do they breathe after bad news? How do they walk into a room when nothing needs to be proven? Find that feeling, that posture, that presence, and embody it. 2. Your environment will confirm your frequency. The world is always reflecting what you're resonating. If you notice chaos, pause. Don't fix the chaos. Check the channel you're on. If you notice misalignment, don't analyze the misalignment. Ask, did I shift out of my future self's frequency? Frequency is the cause. Reality is the symptom. 3. Make decisions from the signal, not the fear. The echo self made choices based on urgency, on pressure, on imagined risk. The future self moves differently, not slowly, but cleanly, precisely. They aren't emotional reactors. They are energetic filters. They don't ask, what's safest? They ask, what's most in resonance? And if it's not aligned, they walk away, not with drama, but with peace. 4. Frequency doesn't chase, it attracts. You don't have to hunt down the life you're meant for. You just have to match it energetically. Stop efforting. Stop strategizing. Start calibrating. If the future you is peaceful, stop settling for stress. If the future you is deeply rested, stop glorifying fatigue. If the future you is respected, stop tolerating spaces where you are misunderstood. Every act of resonance draws that life closer. 5. Daily practice, signal check-ins. Throughout your day, pause and ask, am I embodying the version of me who has already arrived? Does this moment feel like expansion or compression? Is this choice in harmony with the life I say I want? These questions aren't just reflections, they're realignments. If the answer is no, you shift, not someday, now. That's how you live in the frequency. You don't wait for alignment, you become it. And when you're in that space long enough, something beautiful happens. Reality starts to obey you, not because you're manipulating it, but because you're matching it. You've tuned into the station, where the future you already broadcasts. And now, that signal becomes your compass. Next, we close the loop, not with a finish line, but with a return to the version of you that never needed to be built, only remembered. This is not the end. It's the beginning, but not the beginning of a journey, a grind, a climb, a search. This is the beginning of being, pure, unfiltered, uninterrupted by echoes. For the first time, you're not trying to become. You're no longer rearranging. You're no longer explaining. You're no longer fixing. You are being, fully. And that alone is the highest form of success. Let's acknowledge what you've done. You've seen the echo self, not as a villain, but as a relic, an outdated survival program, a memory loop wrapped in identity. You met it, you challenged it, you outgrew it, then you built, not as a reaction, but as a return, to truth, to clarity, to peace. You became the version of you. That doesn't sabotage alignment, because alignment is now your baseline. And that's the deepest truth. This isn't something you maintain with effort. It's something you remember with awareness. No echo, no mask, no loop, no proof, no pose, just you. So what does life look like now? 1. Decisions are clear, not calculated. You don't ask 10 people for permission. You don't overthink your yes or your no. You don't filter your intuition through fear. You just know. And that knowing comes with stillness, comes with space, comes without explanation. 2. Relationships are nourishment, not negotiation. You don't need people to fix you. You don't chase. You don't prove. You don't perform. You attract through frequency. You connect through resonance. You detach with love. Your circle becomes clearer, smaller, richer. And you become immune to re-entering dynamics that require your echo-self to exist. 3. Growth becomes subtle, not dramatic. You're not chasing breakthroughs. You're not addicted to breakdowns. You're not trying to earn another layer of healing. You simply live. And in that living, you learn. Gently, quietly, powerfully. Every moment becomes the curriculum. And you're not the student anymore. You're the expression. 4. Identity becomes fluid, but your essence stays constant. You can be serious or playful, quiet or bold, introverted or expressive. But none of it defines you. None of it limits you. It's all expression, not explanation. You've transcended the need for a label, because you now live as the energy beneath every form. 5. You no longer ask, "Who am I?" You don't need to answer that anymore. You feel it. You are it. And it needs no justification. This is the end of echoes. Not because the world got quieter, but because you stopped listening to noise that never belonged to you. You now move through life with a calm certainty that is unshakable. Not because life is easy, but because you no longer abandon yourself to make it tolerable. This is the frequency of wholeness, the state beyond identity, the end of cycles, the beginning of peace. You're not chasing alignment anymore. You are the alignment. You're not building the future anymore. You are the frequency that attracts it. You're not asking for success anymore. You are the version of you that success was always searching for. Welcome to your life, echo-free, fully aligned, entirely yours. Now live it.